Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt, and tonight we have breaking news coming from around the world, as we've been able to hear significant developments inside the Russian Federation, as the Ukrainian armed forces have been able to conduct a successful HIMARS artillery strike against a Russian command post within the Kursk Oblast, successfully killing the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Russian Navy today. A major breaking development, as this commander was necessary for the conducting and operations of the Russian naval infantry brigades that are currently inside of the Kursk and Sumy Oblasts, waging battle with the Ukrainian armed forces across the Kursk plain. We have also been able to hear significant news from the People's Republic of China that, according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs inside of the Communist Chinese nation, they have stated that the Russian Federation is an ally, and the People's Republic of China cannot afford a Russian military defeat inside of the Ukraine war. And while, according to their official statements, they are not yet providing any kind of support, they will still not allow a defeat of the Russian Federation in combat. We have been able to hear, outside of that news, that the Islamic Republic of Iran has seen that more significant blows have been dealt to their proxy forces throughout the region, as the Israeli armed forces have been conducting airstrikes against the Quds and Hezbollah forces inside of Southern Lebanon, and successfully killed a Quds commander within Southern Lebanon just earlier today. We have also been able to hear that an unknown explosion has occurred near to the area of the Erbil airport, which is believed to have been launched by Iranian proxy forces against allied Western forces in the region of the Kurdish northern area of Iraq. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear out of the Islamic Republic of Iran, that the Islamic Republic of Iran has reopened its airspace, while at the same time, the United States of America has now levied new sanctions against the Islamic Republic of Iran as of today. Meanwhile, the Russian Federation is losing significant influence inside the Caucasus Mountain region area, as Armenia is soon to ban all Russian television channels from Armenia Television, completely banning any sort of Russian soft propaganda influence on the country, while at the same time, Azerbaijan is openly entertaining the idea idea of basing NATO forces in the terms of the Turkish army inside of Azerbaijan, as the diplomatic situation has continued to deteriorate between Azerbaijan and the Russian Federation after it was found that the Russian Federation had been torturing Azerbaijanis inside of Russia, which led to the Azerbaijanis arresting FSB agents inside of their country, which then in turn was responded to by the Russian Federation arresting even further Azerbaijani officials and leaders of cultural groups inside the Russian Federation. Outside of that, the Ukrainian Armed Forces has just concluded a successful Storm Shadow missile attack on the Donetsk Oblast just tonight, with only one missile being shot down, but multiple others being confirmed to have landed their marks and caused serious damage throughout the entirety of the Donetsk region on their attempted targets. We have also been able to hear news out of the Lipetsk Oblast that the Ukrainian Armed Forces have been able to land and hit successful strikes at Yelets on a major ballistic missile factory, and also inside the city of Lipetsk itself on other key military sites and war industry facilities. Outside of that, even major news happened today as a phone call has concluded between the President of the Russian Federation and the President of the United States of America. And the Russian Federation not only made it clear that they are no longer looking for a resolution of the war and will be continuing to push their war goals till completion whenever that may happen, but they even went to the absolutely insane lengths to make the statement that the Russian Federation was responsible for the founding of the United States of America and also was responsible for the Union winning the Civil War. I'm not making that up. Putin actually said that on the phone call. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear inside of the Federal Republic of Germany that the Federal Republic has reached out to the United States of America and has requested to buy 2 Patriot missile systems to provide to Ukraine on the German taxpayers' dollar. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear throughout the entirety of the front lines, the Ukrainian resistance has proven strong today, and most defensive lines have held, while the Russian Federation is still seeing that they are being held back in Sumy, and a small amount of ground was gained on the Kupiansk front today. We have also been able to hear that the Ukrainian Armed Forces did conduct a Neptune anti-ship missile ground attack inside of Crimea earlier today, firing off those missiles, but we have not been able to hear of impacts or damage assessments, at least at this moment, possibly suggesting that most of those missiles may have been shot down, or that we just have not been able to get the information as of yet through our open source intelligence sources. Beyond that, however, the news has been absolutely massive over the course of the day. I cannot say that enough and put enough emphasis on it, that today's news is truly insane in terms of size, scope, and scale, and we have to be able to get into each and every little bit of it. But before I do, I want to make a very clear note to many that Enforcer Matt will be back on our streams on Saturday, and I also want to make sure to let everyone know that the 4th of July on the Enforcer channel is an observed channel holiday, and for this reason, there will be no live stream running tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time in observance of Independence Day inside the United States of America. On the other hand, we will be releasing a little bit of a treat. We actually will be releasing Columbia, the Gem of the Ocean, the orchestrated track that was made exclusively for the Enforcer channel by the composer Marcos Barilari of Disney Pixar fame, as well as Budapest Scoring of Squid Game fame, which will be released on the channel tomorrow instead of the live stream as a 4th of July sort of a commemoration. Nevertheless, we still have massive significant news, and we are going to be moving into that right now. And the most significant news that we were able to hear of today came from the Kursk Oblast, as we were able to hear that a HIMARS strike struck and destroyed a specific facility near to the area of Lgov, or near to the area of the city of Ivanino. We're not exactly sure which. They're only several miles from each other, but we were able to see video of the destroyed headquarters, which we could see in this clip right here.
Давай, пацаны.
When you see Russian soldiers hand-picking through the debris as they're trying to look for survivors or any kind of bodies to be able to be recovered. It was not long after the HIMARS strike was conducted and the recovery operations or the rescue operations were being conducted that a specific someone, who's very important so far in the Russian chain of command, was uncovered from the rubble and declared dead on the spot. Apparently died from his injuries in the ATACMS explosion that hit the building. It was none other than the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Russian Navy, pictured right here, who was confirmed dead in the rubble pile earlier today. It does appear that the Russian Federation has now lost 3 top officials in about 48 hours. They lost the commander of the Black Sea Fleet yesterday, they've lost the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Russian Navy today, which actually holds an even more important position than the Admiral of the Black Sea Fleet, and we've also been able to hear that the General in charge of the 5th Division of the FSB, responsible responsible for counterintelligence inside of CIS countries, has also been killed yesterday in a car bombing. This means that 3 top Russian officials have now been declared dead, and this statement was also made by the Russian Ministry of Defense today, making it even more clear that this commander was certainly killed, without a doubt, in the strike that occurred near Ivanino or Lvov earlier today. The loss will be heavily felt throughout the Navy. We've actually been able to hear that the Russians have started to play the Village People song in the Navy in honor of the loss of the Deputy Commander-in-Chief, but apparently, unlike the song, he's apparently going to be getting out of the Navy in pieces for the large part. Nevertheless, it does appear that the Deputy Commander-in-Chief is one of the latest casualties that is involved in the high-end attacks that the Ukrainians have been conducting against Russian leadership, at least recently. The reason why this Russian Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Navy was inside of the Kursk Oblasts, far away from any sort of a body of water, is actually a little bit of an interesting one. Unlike the United States of America, the Russian Federation does not have a Marine Corps. They actually have something called the Naval Infantry. Naval Infantry are incredibly similar to that of the United States Marine Corps, at least in how they function, and also how they are, unfortunately, much like the Marines in the United States, heavily underfunded. This does, however, lead to the fact that naval commanders in Russia actually have the responsibility of not only conducting naval actions at sea, but also conducting infantry battles or land battles on shore to extensively large degrees. And there really isn't a division of command where, for example, in the United States, the Marine Corps is a department of the Navy, but operates largely separately from the Navy. Of course, you don't see an admiral largely taking command of any of the Marines forces. You generally see that the Commodore would on land, but beyond that, the Russian Navy does not operate that way. The Russian Navy actually takes their naval commanders, admirals, and so on, that can go straight from fleet operations to shore-based operations like the ones we were seeing in Kursk. Most significantly, the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade of the Russian Federation has been heavily present in the prior Kursk battles and also in the Sumy offensive currently. The 810th Naval Infantry Brigade is actually one that's considered to be a little bit elite, or at least compared elite to the rest of the naval infantry inside the Russian Federation. This is actually their patch right here, and this Naval Infantry Brigade was stood up back in 1967. While it is not a part of the original Black Sea Naval Infantry, it is still considered to be part of the Black Sea Marines for the large part, as its basing historically, even up until 2014, was out of the port of Sevastopol, and still to this day, technically is still out of the port of Sevastopol, even at this moment. The 810th Naval Infantry Brigade is one of the best equipped inside of the Russian Naval Infantry, and actually had been sent as a surge brigade into the Kursk Oblast when the Ukrainian breakthrough occurred and they started to rapidly race towards the E38 highway at Rylisk, Lvov, and Kurchatov, and closer to the nuclear power plant just north of Ivanino. Since then, the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade and other naval infantry brigades of the Russian Navy have been present in all battles in the Kursk Oblast and also inside Sumy currently, and this is the reason why that Deputy Commander-in-Chief was inside of the Kursk headquarters that just got attacked by the HIMARS so many hundreds of miles away from the Navy, is because the guy was actually trying to command the infantry forces of the Navy that were actually in Kursk at the moment. It does appear that his loss is significant. We're not really sure, at least at the moment, how much of an impact this will have on the naval infantry's ability to operate or coordinate their forces. It may actually be somewhat minimal, as the Deputy Commander-in-Chief may be quickly replaced by someone else who may have a decent amount of the same level of competence, pretty much equally incompetent is the optimist way of saying that inside of the Russian armed forces, and so the damage may not be that severe. But one thing is going to become quite clear: Russian commanders, wherever they may be, are generally not safe, and this may lead them to pull a Khamenei, which is to hide in a bunker and wait until things improve, and so far it doesn't really look like much of anything is going to be improving, at least here in the near future. But this is once again another high-level official loss that the Russian Federation has suffered, and it's the one of the 3 highest officials that we've seen being killed so far in the past 48 hours alone. Outside of that, the Russian Federation has also had a little bit of a turn of fortune today, at least on official diplomatic statements from the People's Republic of China, which has started to try and gloss over this loss at least a little bit. The People's Republic of China has openly come out and stated the following, according to the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who's stated to the European Union's Kaja Kallas that Beijing, or China for the large part, cannot afford a Russian defeat in Ukraine, fearing a full U.S. pivot to China. Wang also denied claims of material support for Russia's war, saying if China was helping, the conflict would have ended long ago, largely showing China's Wang in the process and really making it clear that the People's Republic of China is openly hostile and unfriendly to Western and American interests as a whole. One thing that is interesting to note, though, is that the Chinese foreign minister has made China's strategy incredibly clear, at least with the war in Ukraine. And that is the fact that the Russian Federation is a diversion, or at least viewed as a diversion by the Chinese, for the United States of America. And while they are continuing to deal with the situation in Eastern Europe, the People's Republic of China is hoping that that will divide our attention or divide our forces a little bit, so that way they will be able to continue to build up their forces in East Asia and eventually pull off that inevitable invasion of Taiwan that's going to be coming in a couple of years from this point. Nevertheless, it is incredibly obvious that the People's Republic of China does not have a mutual relationship with the Russian Federation. It is nearly a parasitic one. They are willing to let the Russians die to the last man to keep the United States and Europe focused inside of Eastern Europe instead of letting them focus against the People's Republic of China. And this is once again showing us that at least as far as the Russians were concerned, in that classified publishing that was leaked to the press earlier that declared the People's Republic of China an opportunistic enemy, that actually does appear to truly be the case. The Russians are not that far off, at least in the intelligence gathering, on what China's true ambitions are. The Chinese are playing the Russians so that way in the end they can play the United States and continue to keep the United States and Europe paying attention inside of Eastern Europe. It doesn't really mean that we are now able to see that the entire Ukraine war is pretty much continuing as a ploy for the Chinese to keep us distracted. We still have to fight this thing to the conclusion and win. But I think what's making, what's a little bit more pressingly clear at the moment, to put it this way, is that the Chinese are the leaders of the Axis powers. There is no doubt about it now that the People's Republic of China is behind most every hostile action happening out there in the world. And while they all have different beginnings, the Chinese are trying to bring them to one conclusive end, which is the defeat of the United States of America and our Western sphere as a whole. This is going to make it even more pressingly clear that the United States of America is entering a world that has a clear, strong Axis power, at least as far as their aggressiveness is concerned, and the United States needs to ramp up its abilities to respond to such an act by the Chinese, or such ideas as the Chinese, and be able to prepare to face down the Russians in Eastern Europe, and the Chinese in East Asia, and the Iranians in in the Middle East if necessary. But still, it is an absolutely crazy statement to make, and it is clearly showing that the Chinese have a vested interest in continuing the war in Ukraine, unlike the prior statements that they've been making throughout the conflict, which would paint them as a peace-loving dove, wanting the war to come to a conclusion where both sides see their faults and just pretty much say, it is what it is. It doesn't appear that they are wanting to do that any longer, and they're making incredibly clear that they want the Russians to win, or they want the war to keep going until the Russians eventually win or America and Europe is exhausted. Beyond that, a lot of people have been putting in their opinions and 2 cents on this statement today, and some people have actually been a little bit angered at this poll and have actually shown their wang about it. But beyond that, a lot of people are saying, speaking about the Chinese news, that the Chinese Foreign Ministry stated that they can't afford a Russian defeat in Ukraine because the U.S. would pivot to China. A lot of people have been saying that it's true and China means this for real. At least 44% of people actually did make that statement. Others, 29%, are saying that it seems like a mix of lies and truth. 18% are saying it's false, it's a fake reason, and 9% are saying that they're unsure and undecided. If we were to go about this analytically, there is actually a reason for the People's Republic of China to pit the Russian Federation, or at least support the Russian Federation enough to pit them against the greater West as a whole. The Russians are grinding themselves down, and they are grinding themselves down at the expense of the United States and to the benefit of the Chinese. This is something that is a little bit clear if you look at it from a greater global strategic perspective. China is a predatory country. It operates a lot like a parasite. Usually, it tries to go into countries that are down on their luck and then financially enslave them to the Chinese communist economic system. This has done them quite well with smaller countries, but so far China has never really been able to claim a big fish yet. And the Russian Federation is the first big-ish fish that they can end up getting. The Russian economy is incredibly small. The Russian population is also wildly small. It is not something that is, to say, a big fish. To actually make this statement, the Federal Republic of Germany is a far larger fish than that of Russia. But beyond that, the People's Republic of China knows that the Russian Federation continues to grind themselves down in this war. They are forced to get Chinese support. If they are forced to get Chinese support, the Chinese are able to financially indebt the Russians. The Russians also grind down their military in Ukraine, meaning that Russia is no longer militarily a threat to the Chinese, and the Chinese will also be able to rebuild the Russian military in their own image, allowing them to make a good bit of money off of it. Not only that, Europe and the United States is continuing to have to funnel weapons into Ukraine and also expend a decent amount of our older, near-to-retirement resources and supplies to be able to grind down the Russian army, which doesn't really have that much of an impact on us. We're replacing the equipment anyways, but still, it is something to keep in note that that reserve equipment could possibly be used in an emergency scenario against the People's Republic of China or an invasion of Taiwan. With that in mind, the Chinese stand to gain a lot from the ongoing conflict at the moment, and the Russians stand to lose a lot, and the West stands to lose practically nothing. But nevertheless, no matter which way you try and split the hair, it is wildly clear the People's Republic of China does stand a lot to gain, no matter which way you look at it, whether they're trying to financially indebt the Russians to China in perpetuity, or if they're trying to grind down the West, if you believe that's even possible. They are getting some sort of a gain out of it, and it does make it quite clear that the People's Republic of China is making these statements with clear strategic purpose behind them, much like they do with everything else. Beyond that, however, we have also been able to hear some interesting things about how stuff has gone, or how things largely went, over the phone call today that occurred between the President of the Russian Federation and the President of the United States of America. And there were some really interesting things that happened before the phone call, happened during the phone call, and happened after the phone call. Unfortunately, I cannot show y'all any of the President of the United States' direct comments on the phone call, but they were not positive, but I'll be getting to a summarization of that here in a minute. We were able to see, however, that Putin did openly insult the President of the United States before he even went into the phone call, because he was actually at a press meeting or some sort of like a forum. I don't know what the hell this is, but what's interesting is that he went out of his way to offend the president. So I'll just let y'all watch this here and read the subtitles.
Пожалуйста, не сердитесь, я понимаю, что мы могли бы и больше поговорить, но так неловко заставлять себя ждать, там сейчас обидеться еще. Спасибо вам большое, удачи.
As you can see, he ended up making it sound like the President of the United States has ego issues. But nevertheless, it does appear that the President of the Russian Federation threw out an insult about the President of the United States to this waiting crowd at this forum. It's interesting that the President of the Russian Federation, which is pretty much Putin, is always in a forum before these phone calls happen. You would think that he wouldn't be in a forum, but he's just being inconvenienced, like he's got to go call mama real quick while this press conference is going on. He does this every single time. But beyond that, the phone call did commence. The phone call didn't last all too long, and it didn't turn out to do anything well at all in America's favor, or at least to make it look like the United States is a bunch of grand negotiators as far as peace negotiations are concerned. Putin made it incredibly clear on this phone call today he's not stopping the war. That was wildly clear. The President of the United States also stated that later. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any clips of the President making that statement that didn't have a watermark on it from Fox News, C-SPAN, so on and so forth, so I'm not able to show the actual video clips because we also unfortunately do not have enough money to just have some sort of press correspondent running around with a camera waiting for comments from the President. So unfortunately, I was also not able to get that clip for us here on the channel. Outside of that, we did hear that while Putin was in the phone call, y'all are going to get a big kick out of this one. At least a lot of our American viewers will, because if you are a bit of an avid historian, you will know that this is certainly not true whatsoever. Putin made the claim, and I'm just going to read it to y'all to make sure that I get it right, that according to Putin, Russia had a significant role in the development of American statehood, including during the War for Independence and during the Civil War. So what was actually said today in the details of the phone call, or largely what was being stated by the Russians, was that the Russian Federation is the reason why America exists. That's what they said, pretty much. They said that the Russian Federation actually helped create the United States of America, and that that the Russians were a profound developer of our nation's statehood. That is absolutely ridiculous, because if you know any of American history, you'll know that nobody supported the United States, especially not the Russians. Because the Russians were actually allies with the British, at least at the time, to some extent. The only country that openly came to our support, or at least two that came to our support, was primarily the French and somewhat the Spanish. But that was absolutely absurd to hear, absolutely straight up delusional. Not only that, he then came through to say that apparently the Russian Federation also helped the Union to win the Civil War. Because that was also inferred as well, that the Russians helped out greatly in the U.S. Civil War. Now, if anyone knows anything about what was going on in the Civil War in Europe, everyone will know that the Russians, and the rest of the Europeans for that matter, actually looked at the United States as a clown show and a bunch of idiots fighting this war. Because they said that the U.S. didn't have any tactics, we didn't have any strategy, there was no cavalry, there was no advanced maneuvers, there's practically no training. They were dogging on Union and Confederate forces throughout the entirety of the Civil War. Military observers would come over here from Britain, Russia, France, Germany, well, really Prussia at the time. Germany didn't exist in its modern form, but they would come over and then they would end up concluding there's nothing to learn from here. There's nothing at all. It looks like they're way behind the times. And you know what's a little bit ironic about that, folks, just to share this with y'all, is that while those statements were largely being made from a nationalist vein, the United States was the original creator, at least in the modern form, or at least in the modern sense, of trench warfare, because trenches were heavily used in the siege of Petersburg and also in the siege of Vicksburg as well, for the first time ever in history, at least to the extent and style that they were made. And those same types of trench works would largely be employed inside of Western Europe in World War I. So a little bit ironic that they'd say that there's nothing to learn when they actually did learn that trench warfare was a fighting tactic of the future for the greater part. But nevertheless, the Russian Federation largely, I think, made those statements, or Putin made those statements, to incense the President of the United States, because after the phone call was conducted, the President actually spoke to the press briefly about the phone call and said that he was not pleased at all, and that it appears that the Russians are pretty much inconsolable, or there's no way to negotiate a peaceful settlement with the Russians, because it's quite clear that they are on the path of war and do not want to get off of it whatsoever. We are still going to be waiting to see what comes of this, because we also were able to hear right after that reporters then asked, well, if that's the case, why aren't we giving weapons to Ukraine? And then the President of the United States said, we are giving them weapons, which we really aren't at the moment, and that we're trying to figure out how to make it work long-term, which has already been working long-term, so I don't really know what's the holdup. And a lot of people in Congress are also not really understanding what's the holdup either, from all ends as well. So we're trying to keep track of that situation and see what's going on with it, when things are going to change, when we start to provide more support or a greater amount of support. But it is incredibly clear at this point, from everyone's perspective, the Europeans, the United States, everyone in the world, the Russians do not want to end the war. The war isn't going on because of the Ukrainians, the war is going on because of the Russians. The Ukrainians are keeping it going because if they give up, they cease to exist as a country, and then they're put under the subjugation of the Russians. And no one wants to live under the subjugation of the Russians. That's just a simple statement. But with that, I hope that does kind of cover that news the best we can. It's a fairly interesting one, but still, a lot of people have been talking about another interesting development that we've been able to hear about today, is the Germans are attempting to come into the rescue in the meantime of the lack of U.S. aid that is flowing into Ukraine. According to information that we've been able to get from the Bild, Germany wants to buy 2 Patriot systems from the U.S. for the state of Ukraine. The German government is urgently working on a solution to provide Ukraine with new defense systems and a sufficient number of Patriot missiles. The Germans are waiting for the signal from the Secretary of Defense regarding the 2 Patriots, and the Germans will also finance this purchase for the state of Ukraine. Many of y'all will know that right now the Patriot systems are pretty much bone dry inside of Ukraine, and not only that, The Ukrainians are always asking for more Patriot missile systems. Patriots are pretty much a Wunderwaffe of the war. The Patriots have proven to be far more apt or successful in their role than ever originally conceived. The Patriots have been able to shoot down hypersonics. The Patriots have been able to shoot down practically any incoming missiles that could be found. As long as they have ammo, they work. The Patriots are insanely good. We generally understand that it's a bit of an eclectic variety of Patriots that the Ukrainians are getting. They've been getting literally all three variants, the Pack 1, the Pack 2, and the Pack 3, particularly the Pack 2 from what we understand. But those missile systems have done wildly well inside of Ukraine, and the Ukrainians, specifically the president of Ukraine, has been asking for more of these systems and more missiles, more so than anything else. Forget mortars, forget artillery, forget rocket artillery, forget storm shadows or attackums. The most important thing that the Ukrainians are looking for is to create a shield over their skies. In modern warfare, a shield over one's sky is one of the most important things that someone can have. If you are not able to defend your skies, you are not able to defend your country, simply put. It's been that way for decades now, and it's certainly been proven in the war in Ukraine. The Russian Federation, it pretty much is laid to waste about every week in some place or another across the whole of Russia by Ukrainian drone attacks because they have no apt or proper air defense for most of the country. It shows through every time a Ukrainian drone or a missile is able to make its mark. And just today, they were also able to make their marks inside the Donetsk Oblast, which we'll be getting to here in a little bit. But beyond that, it does seem, at least from what we're hearing right now, that the Ukrainians are still needing those missile defense systems, so that way the Russians cannot do the same things to Ukraine. And it appears that a lot of people have been giving their opinions on what will be happening with the Patriot missile systems that the Germans are trying to acquire to then hand over to the Ukrainians. Would the United States agree to that, or would they not? And it seems as though a large majority of people are saying that the U.S. will agree to that because the U.S. will do it for the money. Although, to be honest with y'all, it's not really big change. It's chunk change. These systems cost $1 billion a piece, and also the missiles only cost about $1 million per interceptor. And I know that sounds really expensive. It sounds expensive to me. I've never seen $1 billion in my life. I've never seen $1 million in my life. But on military terms or military budgetary terms, that's actually quite small. And also considering that the U.S. government spends about $7.5 trillion a year, and now with the passing of the big beautiful bill, I think that's also going up to about $8 trillion a year, or somewhere around there. It sure as hell is not a massive amount of money. It's not like we're making profits off of the sale of 2 Patriot missile systems. But it does seem as though a lot of people are believing that they will do it, this sort of a purchase order for the Germans because they will be making some money off of it. But still, I just don't really know why we would be that much of a stickler for it, because it's not like missing $2 billion in 2 Patriot systems and then a couple of $100 million extra for several hundred interceptors is really going to be breaking the bank for the United States, or really, saving the economy or the national deficit. It just doesn't work that way. But another group of people, 19%, are saying there's a 50-50 chance. The 15% are saying that the U.S. is truly conserving its weapons, saying that there is just too little of too many valuable weapon systems and interceptors that would be necessary to defend the United States, and for that reason, there isn't going to be any provision of missile systems or, for that matter, interceptors to the state of Ukraine. And another 9% are unsure and undecided. I would have to say that I actually do think that the United States would send the Patriots for the money, at least from what we can see right now, because it does seem that the United States is getting a little bit frugal with handing out free stuff generally in our greater benefit for the Western Alliance. Doesn't really seem like something that we're that apt to do these days, so I think that we may actually agree to this offer and then send it, which also would show, just to make this a little bit clear, it also would show that we're not running out of Patriot missile interceptors and Patriot batteries if we agree to that. If we agree to that, it's showing that we're not wanting to give Ukraine weapons because they're largely getting them for free. And I think that that's something that needs to be reassessed a little bit. And I want to make this a little bit clear to a lot of people who are here on our show right now. Giving the Ukrainians weapons free right now is doing us a lot of good in saving us a lot of money later. The reality of the matter is that over about 3.5 years of war so far, we have given the Ukrainians about $100 billion in support. So that comes down to about $33 billion a year. Now, to put this into perspective, I want to make this also a little bit more clear. The Israelis, who largely are fighting a bunch of ragtag guys running around in the desert in Gaza and Lebanon with a couple of AKs and maybe a couple of sugar bottle rockets as well, we give the Israelis about $26 billion a year. No questions asked, no hesitation, no credit card, no bullshit. It's just straight $26 billion to Israel every single year just because they're kind of neat. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, have to somehow justify their existence every single year to just get $30 billion. And they're fighting, at least on paper, what was the second largest military on the planet before the war in Ukraine began. And we've been able to see that they have cut the Russians down to size on quite literally a shoestring budget. No one would have expected this at the beginning of the war. We have beaten the Russians at about the cost of running maybe a couple of brigades in the Marine Corps, or what they call these days Marine Expeditionary Units, over the course of a single year. We've beaten the Russians pretty much at about $100 billion. And really, that's just $60 billion worth of military equipment. That isn't including the $40 billion extra of humanitarian aid that we've given to the Ukrainians as well. So it becomes increasingly clear when you put it in that kind of metric that supporting the Ukrainians is not just a matter of our strategic integrity, it is a matter of cost efficiency. The Russians are running headlong into a nation that was never known for its military prowess historically in the modern age. They hardly even existed in the modern age. They had been absorbed by the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union for hundreds of years before that. They finally get their independence, and then they bring the Russians down to size. They cut the army in about half at this point, at least materially, for $60 billion. That's a great value. We give the Israelis $25 billion a year, and Hamas and Hezbollah still exist, and the Iranians generally still exist as well. The nuclear program was dealt with, but still, when you put that into perspective, the costs of dealing with the Russians has been far cheaper than the cost of dealing with anyone else anywhere in the world. And so I would say that it is quite important that we find a way. If we're saying that we're running out of missiles and precision-guided munitions here in Ukraine, here in the United States, we need to find a way to not run out of munitions and also continue to provide munitions to the Europeans to help them rearm since they're paying customers for our weaponry, and to also give weapons to the Ukrainians so that way they can continue to blast the Russians away. I mean, it's a literal dollar barrel bargain that we're getting here in Eastern Europe right now. And that would be an important thing, not only for the Europeans, it would be an important thing for us because we want to protect our paying customers, which are the Europeans. And also, we're paying customers of the Europeans as well in turn for their goods. So we generally want to protect the whole arrangement that we have going on right now. And so providing some weaponry at pretty much discount prices to the Ukrainians to go blast the Russians is something that I think everyone could get on board with. The Ukrainians will support it. The Europeans would support it. I know a lot of y'all would support it. Because what would be worse? Us giving them about $30 billion a year or so until the war is over, and they end up winning, because the Russians cannot financially continue on this conflict, or at some point we see that the Ukrainians collapse, and then this might eventually go into Eastern Europe and Poland, like the president was saying just 2 weeks ago, and then we have to go over there, and then we have to spend trillions of dollars fighting the Russians, and then it might even go nuclear if things are not resolved within the first opening weeks when the Russians start getting beat pretty badly. So what would be worse? I would say that the former would be worse than actually the latter would be worse than the former. That would be my honest opinion. So with that, I hope that addresses that well, or at least that idea, in my opinion. And also, I've seen that a lot of people have also been weighing in on another question. Because Putin did inform the president today that Russia will never give up in the Ukraine war. A message of strength. As we all know, the Russians are some of the strongest people on the planet. Their livers take more abuse than anyone else's in the world. Although some of them do die from alcoholism, they are considered, let's see, what do they call them? Let's see, I think it's called the Slava Russia in the Russian world. But beyond that, there's a lot of people saying that the Russians are a strong, tough people, and they could truly keep the war going. Even if they run out of money, food, gas, and everything else that pretty much keeps the military running, they can keep it going. But a lot of people are wondering what's going to be happening now. Beyond all that bravura talk from the Russians about they can go anywhere and do anything, even if they're eating weeds and thistles, it does appear that a lot of people, at least 39%, are saying that there is really no plan at the moment for a U.S. or Western response to that kind of a statement. Because it generally wasn't planned. It seems as though the United States has had a little bit of overconfidence, at least recently, in our negotiating abilities, and that's leading us to be a little bit overconfident to the point that we're not really expecting people to do what they're doing. Like, for example, the ceasefire, like, I've just got to say really quickly, folks, as an aside, the ceasefires that we have negotiated in every corner of the world right now are on a house of cards, and all of them are about to collapse. I'm just going to be real with you all for a little bit. The Pakistan-India ceasefire that we negotiated, that is not lasting through this year. It just can't. Right now, the Indians still have rescinded the water treaty that they had with Pakistan, and if the Pakistanis don't get that water flowing, the Pakistanis are going to go to war with India. They have no choice. So that ceasefire didn't really resolve anything, except for the fact that we stopped the shooting now, but the shooting will start up later. So we didn't actually resolve the conflict and truly bring peace. It's more so a Neville Chamberlain-style peace in our time sort of a thing. We somehow found a way to end it, but we didn't resolve the underlying issues that will begin this conflict again here soon. And then in the Middle East, good golly, folks, we didn't resolve anything in the Middle East. We got a ceasefire with Iran. They made it very clear they're still going to be working on a nuclear weapons program, and we're already making it clear in the United States we're probably going to have to bomb them at some point within the next couple of years again to stop them from developing this nuclear weapons program. So while we delayed the nuclear weapons program, we didn't stop it completely. We also know that the ceasefire that we negotiated previously, just a couple of months ago, earlier in this year with Hamas, completely fell through. We're now attempting negotiations on another one right now, and we said that we had a ceasefire. Hamas is saying that they do not have a ceasefire, and the Israelis are also saying that there doesn't really appear to be a clear path to a ceasefire right now. The ceasefire with Hezbollah already collapsed. The Israelis are bombing and killing them today. And we also know that the ceasefire with the Houthis didn't work because the Houthis are still firing at the Israelis. And while the United States was down there bombing them to open up the shipping lanes, we were also bombing them back in the day a couple of months ago to stop their attacks on Israel. And they continued their attacks on Israel. So the ceasefire with the Houthis has failed. The ceasefire with Hamas already failed earlier in the year. We're starting up a second one, which will fail again. The ceasefire with Hezbollah failed because they also fired rockets, bottle rockets into northern Israel. And then the ceasefire with the Iranians is bound to fail because they're still working towards a nuclear weapon. We were never able to find common ground with them. Even after we destroyed a good amount of the nuclear program, they are still pressing on. They will not quit no matter what. And then with the Russians here, we are trying hell under high water at this point to bring a ceasefire around in between two countries that are not willing to have a ceasefire. The Ukrainians aren't willing to have a ceasefire because they have to accept insane Russian demands. The Russians aren't willing to accept a ceasefire because to achieve the demands that they're laying out for a ceasefire, they have to pretty much achieve a total victory in Ukraine. So really the issue here, at least with this conflict right now, is that there can't be a ceasefire because the Russians only want a ceasefire if they win. We're not going to let them do that. There's no reason that we should let the Russians win. They are not a friend of the United States. They are not a friend of Europe. They are not a friend of the Ukrainian people. They are not a friend of the Ukrainian government. Everyone involved that's on our side of this situation does not stand anything to gain from the Russians winning this conflict. So trying to bring a ceasefire around right now with the current conditions that we have, it's absolutely ludicrous. What would be better, like we've been saying for months now, is to realize the kind of cards that we've been dealt with on our hand. The Russians are clearly an aggressive state against the United States of America's interests and our interest in Europe. If we want to deal with the Russians, the only way to deal with the Russians is to bomb the Russians. Not through us, but to give the Ukrainians the ability and arms to be able to do so. If the Ukrainians are able to bomb the Russians enough, the Russians will eventually either see an economic collapse or they will have to peace out the war in their own way. Regardless of that, there cannot be a Russian victory in Ukraine. Because if we go into a ceasefire negotiation, the only thing they're accepting is a total victory. That's a defeat through negotiations. Or if we could keep the war going, the only thing they're accepting is total victory, meaning that we are forced to fight. There is no other option right now but to continue the fight against the Russians. Otherwise, we will see that they will continue to move through Ukraine, and not only that, through the rest of Eastern Europe. If you don't believe me, you don't have to. You can listen to the President of the United States, or you can listen to everyone else in NATO and everyone else in the European Union that's saying that very same thing. An invasion by the Russians in Eastern Europe, if they win in Ukraine, is an inevitable fact at this point. So we have to keep fighting in Ukraine. We have to keep supporting them, because at this point in time, at this crossroads in history, we have no other choice. But beyond that, that should be the plan. There should not be a lack of a plan. Peace is not always the answer. Peace is a great answer, and it's great if it's achievable. But we also have to deal with the harsh reality of the fact that the Russians don't want peace, and we can't just quit. We can't walk away. So this has to keep going. You can't stick your head in the sand and pretend like this isn't happening right now. It's something that's happening. It's a problem that we have. It's something that has to be addressed. So we have, well, really, honestly, the truth is, folks, is that we just have to keep the war going and let the Ukrainians keep bombing the Russians until the economy collapses. Because once the Russian economy collapses, the war ends there. There's no way for them to financially continue it. So that's really what we're waiting for at this point, is for the Russian economy to just implode. So with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least in my opinion, with what we're seeing right now, the current prevailing conditions within the region, the current prevailing conditions around the world. We need to find a way to actually end these sorts of conflicts with a real resolution. Otherwise, you're just doing something easy. And I also want to say this really quickly, just to throw these things out there as well. If we truly wanted to see an end to the Pakistan-India conflict and not see it start up again because of the weak ceasefire we made currently, then we should have had it seen to that the Indians and the Pakistanis were able to sign a new water treaty, considering that the Indians rescinded it. That will start a new war. People cannot survive without a drink of water. So they're obviously going to have to go and kill a couple of Indians to go open up those dams in the Jammu and Kashmir region. That's just what's going to happen down there. So we want the peace to hold down there. The United States has to actually get involved. The Department of State's got to get its hands dirty, and we've got to go in there and find a way that the Indians are happy with reopening the dams, and the Pakistanis aren't willing to kill a whole bunch of Indians to reopen the dams. That's what we've got to figure out. What will make everyone happy in that situation where the water starts flowing and everyone isn't going to be killing each other? That's what the Department of State needs to figure out. That is what its job needs to be right now. The other job in the Middle East right now is to be uncompromising with the Iranians. You need to tell the Iranians that we are either going to see an end to the nuclear weapons program, you're officially going to state that, and you're actually going to allow the IAEA into the country to inspect all nuclear sites, or we will take whatever actions necessary to deal with that situation. We will either keep bombing the Iranians until everyone in the Iranian government ends up getting killed and all of the nuclear facilities are destroyed, or we will go in on the ground, even if necessary, to deal with that problem. We are not going to let that stop. We're never going to cease until the nuclear program is dealt with. So it's their choice. They can either choose the nuclear weapons and their inevitable doom, or they can choose to stop the nuclear weapons program and allow the IAEA inspectors in, and will allow them to maintain nuclear programs in their country, but they will not be allowed to enrich any uranium fuel of any kind. That will be the ultimatum. It makes them happy to some degree because the nuclear energy sector still is running in the country, but it makes us happy because we know that they have no enrichment abilities that would allow them to create a nuclear weapon. So everyone's happy there. We don't get everything we want. The nuclear programs are entirely dismantled, but still, it should be something that the Iranians would be willing to agree to because we're not being unfair and uncompromising to the point of mere stupidity. So we could achieve at least a meaningful peace in that region over the fact that they will not be nuclearizing. With the proxy forces, there is no negotiation with terrorists. That is simply put, Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis need to be driven into the ground. The United States of America and the Department of State will not stoop to the level of negotiating with ragtag farmers out in the wilderness that have a whole bunch of rifles. We're never going to negotiate with these people. We will blow them away until they cease to exist. The United States should never have a position that we negotiate with terrorists. That should never be the approach. Terrorists are just that. They are the cutthroats, bandits, and pirates of prior days in history. They have to be dealt with in that accord. They are untrustworthy. They are backstabbers. They're liars. We've seen that multiple times. We saw that with Hamas and Hezbollah breaking their ceasefires, and the Houthis as well. So it's impressively clear to me that, once again, the old statement, we do not negotiate with terrorists, is incredibly true. We need to deal with them, and if the Iranians don't like that, they don't like that. If the Iranians don't like it, then we need to ask the question, why are the Iranians not liking us dealing with terrorist forces? Do they have some sort of a stronger connection to them? And we all know the answer. So the Iranians also have this choice. They can either sit back and shut up about the fact the Israelis and the United States are dismantling their terrorist forces, or they can get involved and then we'll go in and deal with the Iranians the same way we'll deal with them about nuclear weapons. That's how it will work. So if you vote for me as president in 2040, you will see this kind of foreign policy put forward. We won't be looking for war everywhere, but if a war is what someone wants, that's what there's going to get. And there's not going to be any backing off of that, and there's not going to be any beating around the bush or being scared about getting involved in a conflict. If some idiots out there want to be stupid enough that they're pretty much going to force us into a conflict, they're going to have to pay the price. It's not on us, it's on them. The choice was theirs, and they made the wrong one, and we've got to do what we got to do. We got a job to do, and our job is to make sure that our sphere of influence continues to survive, so that way we continue to see that the good life keeps coming for all of our allies and ourselves inside the United States. So with that, it is time for us to move on into the rest of the news beyond that editorialism. But with that, we are going to be moving on down into the area of the Caucasus Mountain region to kind of segue us into the Middle East here for a moment. We were able to hear, at least in Armenia, that apparently the Armenians are going to be banning Russian TV here incredibly soon. We were able to hear this as the Armenians are not really that happy with the Russians. If you know anything about what's been going on in this region, the Armenians have actually been teamed up with by the Russians and Azerbaijan to pretty much beat them up. The Armenians are were a member of the CSTO, and they have been absolutely just beaten back by the Azerbaijanis, largely with the support of the Russians. Now the Armenians are not happy at all. They're going to be banning all Russian television from their country, and not only that, the Azerbaijanis are getting so unhappy with the Russians, they're actually going to allow NATO forces to be based inside of their country in the form of the Republic of Turkey's armies. We were able to hear that today, as Azerbaijan may deploy the largest Turkish military base in the region, and according to the former head of the administration of the president, they said that we need to make this decision soon. They said that the base will be large enough to serve a population of several 100,000 people, not 250 million, that was a typo. But it may even be leased to our other ally, the Pakistani Air Force, which possesses nuclear weapons. So it actually appears that Azerbaijan is trying to stack its cards to not only have the protection of the Turks, which are a NATO power, but also the Pakistanis, which are also a nuclear-armed power that doesn't really have the greatest relations with the Russians, but they're not entirely unfriendly and hostile as well. So it appears that the Azerbaijanis are beginning to tee up a little bit with the Russians, and it appears that they are going to possibly be moving on into a bit of a more hostile stationing with the Russians. I think that this means that the land corridor is about to be closed incredibly soon, because that seems to be only time ticking away for the large part at this moment. But moving on from that and on into the Middle East at large, we have also been able to hear of some major developments throughout this entire region, as the Israelis have gotten back to bombing the Quds. Everyone knows about Cud. That's that stuff that those cows regurgitate out in the fields. It's pretty much grass in one of their stomach chambers, and they, chew on it a little bit more, and then they digest it again. But actually, the Quds are not only that, they are also apparently a terrorist force inside of Lebanon, and we were able to see an Israeli airstrike successfully taking out one of these commanders. Any second now. Oh? Why, what's this? Why? I think that Quds commander is gone. Well, it appears that the Israelis are not playing around anymore. They actually car-bombed the leader of the Quds. So I guess you could say that the Israelis are really growing onto the Quds like kudzu, I suppose. But moving on from that, we also got to see other Israeli airstrikes being conducted against Hezbollah forces within the area of southern Lebanon. And Matthew is correct. The car had a massive backfire. Apparently, there was some Israeli issues, or at least some spark plug issues in the engine, and they said that it is Israeli. But anyways, we can see the smoke billowing off the hills from the airstrikes that the Israelis did conduct earlier today against the Hezbollah forces. Outside of that, we also were able to hear inside of Erbil that some sort of an unknown group, or at least an alleged group, of the Iranian-backed Popular Mobilization Forces appeared to have hit the airport at Erbil, as smoke was rising from the area. Outside of that, we also were able to hear some statements earlier today from the Iranian government. The Iranians have officially now opened their airspace once again, and we have also been able to hear that there are new sanctions against the Islamic Republic of Iran, as the U.S. has issued fresh Iranian sanctions targeting key individuals, entities, and vessels, according to the Treasury Department. Not only that, we also got some archival footage that we have never been able to see before of the actual airstrikes that were conducted inside of Tehran, and here's one of the clips. A little bit of force behind that explosion. It was flinging some cars around. But quite some impressive airstrikes and displays of force by the Israeli Air Forces as they were conducting their attacks against the Islamic Republic of Iran and Tehran about a week or two ago. I once again want to make it clear that footage is not from today. That footage is from about a week and a half ago, back when the airstrikes were being conducted. But that's the first time we've been able to see the security footage from near to the impact sites, just showing the sheer size, scale, and explosive force of those Israeli cruise and ballistic missiles that were fired into Tehran. But outside of that, I do understand that there is quite a many of people who are talking about those ongoing situations in the Middle East, and not only that, there is quite a many people who are also talking about a great deal of many other things, and we want to make sure to get to all of them. But before we get to them, I do have to point out that so far we've had about 100,000 people watch this stream in just the first hour alone. And not only that, we have actually hit 472,000 subscribers as of right now. I've got to thank you all so much once again for enjoying this channel and subscribing to it. And if you've enjoyed it greatly so far right now, considering that there's 13.7 thousand of y'all here, please make sure to subscribe. We run these streams every single day of the week, except for tomorrow because it's an observed holiday. It's the 4th of July. But we run these streams every single day of the week, 6 days a week, covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world. If you're enjoying it tonight, there's a high chance you'll be enjoying it every single night, and also feeling a lot better about knowing what's going on in the world and the kind of ongoing developments that are happening literally everywhere. So please make sure to subscribe and hit that like button, because it's a absolutely wonderful thing to see that a load of people are joining our channel and continuing to enjoy our news coverage. But before we move on into the rest of our news, particularly inside of the state of Ukraine, I do want to make sure that we get a couple of questions before we move on. And so, moving us into our first question segment, we have a $100 super chat from Jesus Crisco, who said, "Thank you two for everything. We know this isn't an easy job, and long live the Lee Spring Army." And long live the Lee Spring Army indeed. I've got to thank you incredibly for enjoying this channel and supporting it, because folks like you help to make this channel possible. It is not an easy job, and I will admit, it is a fairly difficult job without Matthew being on air, because with Matthew on air, it actually allows for us to have a dialogue and to be able to chit-chat, throw out jokes that we laugh at, and all that sort of stuff. Doing this single-handedly really changes the entire dynamic of the show, because for me to be able to maintain some kind of energy or momentum to make it interesting for everyone to hear the news, I pretty much have to talk non-stop the entire length of the show, which would sound like it's perfectly fine. We run 3.5-hour shows normally, and sometimes even 6-hour-long shows. But considering that it's being done non-stop for 2.5 hours, which is something I generally do not have to do, it really isn't a time to take a breath or a break or to take a breather. So it actually ends up becoming not only mentally exhausting, keep up a straight train of thought for 2.5 hours, but it also becomes a little bit exhausting to speak that long. My voice really starts to feel it at the end of these streams every night. But I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Crisco, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this job going. We wouldn't be able to keep the news going every single day. And today was quite large news. I mean, it's absolutely massive news, and we are happy to be here once again tonight, no matter how we have to deliver this news, whether Matthew is on air or if it's just me on air. We are absolutely proud to cover it, and we do everything that we can to make sure that the news is coming out every single day, no matter the circumstances. So a massive thanks to you so much once again, and I of course have to give a huge thanks to Enforcer Matt, who cannot say anything on air currently because he's in bad internet connection on a special mission for the Lee Spring Army. But Enforcer Matt is a huge part of the channel. Not only is he the co-host on air that we get to chit-chat with and talk about all kinds of stuff, and also he adds in a great deal of his own analysis as well, because he is a political science expert, and I'm largely a history expert, at least by our college degrees. He also does a lot of the behind-the-scenes work, which he's still doing on the show right now. Y'all might not be able to hear him, but he's still an integral part of the backbone of this show that helps me to be able to get all the super chats, that helps to moderate the live chat, and do a whole bunch of other things that makes this channel possible. Matthew will be back on the 5th of July. He will be back on air, and y'all will be able to hear him once again on the stream. But for now, unfortunately, this is going to be our final day. Well, unfortunately, more so fortunately, this is going to be our final day of the Enforcer having to run this thing solo. But with that, I hope that does address that quite well. A huge thanks to you once again for the support, Crisco, and helping this channel to keep on running. And long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $21 super chat from B. Woodward. And B. Woodward, old guard and channel legend, mind you, said, if the free world countries can't pull up their boots, let's see here. Sorry, everyone. Actually, the spreadsheet just switched around on me while I was on it right there. If the free world countries can't pull up their boots and stand up to Putin to end this BS, then why should I continue to dump dollars to support an unsupported situation in Europe, frustrating America? I own my future, LSA. I thank you for the support, Barry Woodward, and I'd have to say that if the it's actually a good question, B. Woodward, and there's really not a good answer to that, but I'll try and give the best answer that I can give. While we cannot largely dictate the future of what's going on really anywhere in the world, and while we like to say the Lee Spring Army is helping out a great deal, the truth is that us raising $3,000 to $5,000 every Sunday, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what's spent in Ukraine. I mean, usually $5,000 is spent in less than a minute in Ukraine in the conflict currently, just because of how much it costs to fight a war. But at the same time, it's not necessarily about being the one who gets to have a massive impact, or the fact that Europe and the United States are dragging their feet and they're not really doing much as governments. It really is more so about the fact that our minds or our ideology is in the right place, and that we're doing the right thing as a result of that. Sure, there are a lot of people out there who drag their feet, and then a lot of people who aren't really supporting Ukraine as much as they should be. That's very important for Western and strategic interests that we support Ukraine. It's not important for the Ukrainians to win so that way their country survives. If they survived and we weren't friends with them, it doesn't make a hill of beans difference. The difference is that we are friends with them. We have a lot of potential of what could happen in Ukraine, and not only that, it protects us as well as a whole. So for that reason, that's the reason why I always say that supporting Ukraine and supporting their efforts is an incredibly important and crucial thing. Because if we do not do such a thing, what will we say? We were a part of it. That's what we would have to say. We weren't the people who sat out there every single Sunday on these streams where Matthew and me literally worked for free that day. I kind of want to make that clear, because I don't really think a lot of people think about that. This is a business, this channel. This is a news channel. It's business is covering news, and we do this to make a living. That's really the truth of it. And even still at that point, because I believe in supporting American and Western interest, out of the 7 working days in a week that we generally have most of the time, or 6 sometimes if we're really lucky, out of those 6 working days, one of them we work on for free. We do not make any money on Sundays. We go through the whole working effort, the whole 9 yards. I spend more time on Sundays working to put together the stream, because I also have to put together the fundraiser, than I do any other day of the week. And we do not make a dime. We do not make a cent. That day, we literally work for free. And it's just because of the fact we want to make sure that we're putting our money where our mouth is. We do that because if I was to sit there and say that I support Ukraine because it's inherently within the West's interest, it's in America's interest, and then I myself didn't take it up as an individual citizen to support the interest that I believe in, then I'm as complacent as the European governments or the American government that right now we could say is slacking or it's dragging its feet. That's the reality of the situation. In a country like ours, while it's true that our government is the one who's supposed to be responsible for us, it is us, the people, the citizens, that make up this great nation, and the ones of us who actually believe in our causes and believe in what's best for our nation. We have to take up the slack and carry on, even if it means that it's only a minuscule difference. We are still making a minuscule difference nonetheless. It's better than making no difference. That's the truth. And so I got to thank you incredibly for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make it possible. But that would also be my answer to you as why it's important to continue to support the Ukrainians, even on our end, whether we are actually making a huge difference or not. It is just the fact that we are trying to make a difference that counts. And it's that difference that lets us say that while our governments may not be doing as much to protect our collective strategic and security interests globally, we are doing just about damn well everything that we could. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, which is actually a $31 super chat from Cliff H. And Cliff H said, type goo goo gaga in the chat at any time if you need help. And that's an interesting one. I will have to see about that. But I do thank you incredibly for the support, Cliff H, and helping this channel to keep rolling. It is folks like you who have made this thing possible, help us to keep this thing rolling each and every day. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make this channel possible, and we would have never been able to keep it running. So a huge thanks to a channel legend, Cliff H, once again, for being here with us tonight, and being an old guard as well, and continuing to support this channel, because you help us to make this news coverage possible nightly. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from our questions segment, and on into the rest of the news that we have for the night, particularly the news coming out of Ukraine, as it's now high time to get into the Ukraine war news. Moving on into the Lipetsk region, we were able to hear of significant explosions and air attacks being conducted by Ukrainian forces onto the region, not only at the city of Lipetsk, but the city of Yelets as well, which is also inside the Lipetsk Oblast.
Летит. Это мотоцикл. А, это мотик, походу.
We can hear explosions in the distance. And air defense fire. This guy just seized up.
Охренеть. Вот это гирлянда во дворе. Таких приколов я не видел еще, парни.
That's the end of that clip. It seems like that guy had a lot of fun watching his country under attack. But moving on from that and over to Yelets, we were able to hear something a little bit more significant happening in the city of Yelets. Oh, yes, sir. We were able to hear something quite big, something quite interesting, fantastic even. And let me show you all this really quickly. We were able to hear that the major missile manufacturer inside of Yelets, which is called, and let me make sure I get this correct, let's see, it's the Energia plant in Yelets. It is responsible for producing Iskander-Ms and KH-35U sea-launched cruise missiles. Both of those types have been used in the Ukraine war, and the city of Yelets did come under attack, and the facility was directly hit. We actually have the clip of it right here, and I'll be showing you all that right now. When you see a car driving in, we can see a guy talking about the smoke that's rising over the street.
Напротив, он, видишь, снимает. Или что там напротив? А, блядь, там же какое-то здание было. Или дом. Да газани ты уже, он там припаркуется, что ты еле тащишься.
Да пошел в пизду.
Ну приехал, посмотрели, уехали.
We see them coming through, and it clearly is showing that the Energia plant has been hit.
Сука. Прям в парковку. Пиздец, кто-то нахуй. Машина горит, догорает. Ебать, и кто это будет восстанавливать? Это все завод, блядь? Машины хлопают. Ебать. Да проедь дальше.
Глянь, тут пиздец, посмотри.
А, тут, глянь, все побило.
We see the windows are blown out.
Ничего тут не работает.
And that is actually the one of the main workers' barracks, I guess you could call it that, of the Energia plant.
Побило. Вообще во всех в круг. Семерки нахуй все выбило.
That's quite an explosive way of getting fired at a ballistic missile plant. But beyond that, it does appear that the facility did take a direct hit from the Ukrainian drones, and it was a successful attack. Moving on outside of that news, in the area of Lipetsk, we also were able to hear inside the Russian Federation that oil revenues have dropped to record lows. Very unfortunate for the Russians, a great misfortune indeed, as Russia's oil revenue has dropped to a 2-year low per Bloomberg, with June 2025 income falling nearly 30%. To $5.4 billion. Oil and gas tax revenues are down a third from last year, hinting at economic strain. Boo-hoo-hoo. Isn't that sad, folks? The oil revenues have dropped 30% in a single month. I mean, that's a damn tragedy right there. They're getting 30% less taxes, and the companies that employ millions of Russian citizens, which are also tax-paying citizens, and also are major contributors to the economic machine of the Russian Federation, are seeing a 30% drop in revenue in a month. That's a damn shame. Sounds as though the Russian economy might be in for some layoffs, maybe. Maybe a lot of people will be getting unemployment here soon. Russia is a welfare state, after all. And so that means that if all of these Russian employees are laid off from their jobs, they're all going to file for unemployment. And the Russian government has to pay out that unemployment, generally, unless if they deny it, and they might try and deny it. But what's kind of interesting about that is that they have to pay out all of that unemployment while taking in 30% less revenue, for the large part, than they were the last month. So they're having to pay out a lot more, but they're getting a lot less in to pay that with. So the economic situation for the Russian government is going to be exacerbated greatly, at least here soon, once a larger amount of these companies like Gazprom, Lukoil, and so on begin to lay off a lot of these people that they can't really afford to pay anymore. But moving on out of the Russian Federation and on into the state of Ukraine, we were able to hear of the air defense report overnight, and it was pretty decent. Last night was a milder night. Only 52 drones made it into Ukrainian airspace, 22 were shot down directly, and 18 of them were taken out through electronic warfare measures. We also were able to hear, outside of that, in our location unknowns, some pretty interesting stuff. First off, we were able to see a Russian soldier shooting at a drone. It was quite an interesting event. It appears to be generally archival, at least in the source of the footage, but that doesn't mean anything. Observe the clip and appreciate it. He's shooting at the drone, walking forward with purpose. He's firing, and down he goes. He went down to hell, or at least what the Russians call St. Petersburg. I gotta tell you all that, man, he disappeared about as quickly as a Russian's MREs disappeared and replaced with dog food. Look at this. I've never seen anything like that before. Literally ever. The guy didn't look at the ground once. Once, I tell you. He went down to the sewers, and I think he, while he was down there, he found some of Dmitry Peskov's and Sergei Lavrov's lost relatives, aka turds. Moving on from that and on to the rest of our location unknowns, we also got to see a British-supplied Raven air defense system with about 86 kill marks on it, including that of a cruise missile, crazily enough. But a large amount of drones have been counted as kills on this vehicle, and it does appear that this anti-drone crew has been putting in the hours, quite impressively, I will say. Outside of that, we also were able to see a Ukrainian Su-27 in flight. This is actually an Su-27S. And take a look at this thing. Oh, that is clean. Very clean indeed. I gotta tell you, very impressive stuff. Love to see it. Meanwhile, we also got to see the Russian casualty report as well. And we were able to see that finally, one Bobcat skid steer was destroyed today. And Miss Disa, keeper of the record, stated that troop losses on the 7-day average remains above 1,000. A rare special equipment shows up. And it does. A wild special equipment has appeared. But beyond that, on the 3rd of July, the Russians' losses are as follows. 1,000 Russian soldiers wounded and killed in the past 24 hours, along with 5 APCs, 101 supply trucks, 1 main battle tank, 21 artillery pieces, 85 drones, and 1 Bobcat skid steer. Today was a great day, and Enforcer Matt, he does rejoice. This is what the entire special operation Matthew was on was about, was to go and take care of 1 Bobcat skid steer. Matthew crashed it. Yeah, I'm just kidding, by the way. We had nothing to do with it, but still, very neat to see. Outside of that, moving on out of our location unknowns and on into the front line, we were able to hear that the Ukrainians did retake a small amount of ground today, near to the area of Kolets-Sinkivka, which is in the Kupiansk front, which is incredibly good to hear. Outside of that, moving further down the line and into the rear line, we're going to be moving on into our next major story of the day. There's been a lot of them. They're pretty much piling on top of each other at this point. But this one is a little bit more major than others. We were able to see that the Ukrainians earlier today were firing off some interesting missiles from some Su-24s. Take a look at the clip. We can see them watching the Su-24. Watching it a little bit more. And you see it right there, something seems to be falling off the Su-24. Now, what was falling off the Su-24 that you really didn't get to see a lot was actually some Storm Shadow missiles. And they ended up attacking Donetsk. And they ended up that they hit a decent amount of their targets. One Storm Shadow was shot down, which we'll see in this clip right here, but I'll also show you all the hits that were recorded. And there's the Storm Shadow that got blown up.
Надо бы съебаться, как будто бы. Ну ладно. Еще.
And that's the end of that clip, but here are some others showing all the explosions that did occur. We could record one impact there. We can also record, once again, the shooting down of a Storm Shadow, and we can also see another impact right here. But still, it does appear the Ukrainians did hit some key targets inside the Donetsk Oblast just recently with those Storm Shadow attacks. We believe that they're most likely targeting command and communication headquarters as well as logistics depots, which are farther behind the line. The Storm Shadows do have a several hundred-mile long range, meaning that they were trying to ensure, at least by the firing of these missiles, that they would guaranteed make it to their target with plenty of range to spare, and not only that, would hopefully be able to evade Russian air defense to be able to hit their targets. It does appear that one of them was shot down. I also want to make it clear that the Storm Shadow and Scalp PGs are not stealth missiles. They are lower visibility, so they can still be detected on radar and fired at quite easily, but it does appear that the Russians are not having the greatest of times down there, at least, with that whole, protecting themselves from the ballistic missile attacks and cruise missile attacks the Ukrainians are firing. Moving on from that, we also got to hear that apparently the Ukrainians whipped out Operation Dronecide today inside the Zaporizhia front, where they targeted and destroyed around 40 drone operator posts in Zaporizhia over the past few hours over the course of the day, which we can see in this clip right here. The Ukrainian Air Force was busy today. And we see time and time again that the Russian drone operators, they whip out that little move of incompetence, which is to recover the drone pretty much right from where they're operating at. And you see them continuing to get hammered. Just look at them. Oh, dang. Holy moly. But that's the end of the clip, and great to see Operation Dronecide was a significant success. It does appear that with this attack today, the Ukrainians were largely aiming or attempting to achieve a complete destruction of the Russian armed forces' drone activities, or a large cessation of it within the Zaporizhia front, most likely because they are seeing that the Russians are preparing for a future offensive here in the very near future against the Ukrainian positions that are seen near Robolny, Vasilivka, Huilopol, and so on. And so for that reason, they are trying to make sure to prevent the drones from being used in that offensive as much as they possibly can, or at least that's what we would believe at the moment. But still, an interesting occurrence nonetheless, and we will be waiting to see what kind of an impact it has had on Russian military abilities within the Zaporizhia front. Meanwhile, inside of Kherson, we got to see some Russians driving into a ditch. Take a look at this. Oh, we're gonna have to mute that. They've got Pirates of the Caribbean music playing in there. And you see here that he's trying to fire at the drone. And off into a ditch they go. Ooh. Ooh. Yikes. That's a fender bender for sure. I don't think insurance is going to cover that one. But that's the end of that clip. And y'all can once again see that Tony is behind the wheel. And Tony has made a return for once. Tony is striking again. We also got to hear that apparently the Ukrainians did fire Neptune anti-ship missiles towards Crimea's Astrakhanskaya district. But we have not been able to hear of any impacts since that attack occurred. So we're not sure if they all got shot down or if there's just no one in the area that was able to film the attacks and the impacts. But beyond that, we are now going to be moving on up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on this day of the war. And so, without further ado, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1226 of the war. And let me make sure here that we have these subtitles on in English. Let me try and get that set up for all of y'all really quickly, because I had to go and try and find this last minute. There actually wasn't a speech on the President of Ukraine's website. But without further ado, here's the speech. Speech!
Thank you very much.
Дуже дякую.
Your Majesty.
Ваші величності,
Thanks so much. And,
хочу подякувати.
my friend, thanks so much
Шановна
for
Мете,
invitation. Such
дякую за
beautiful
запрошення в
city,
це
such
чудове
strong people.
місто.
Thank you for your support.
І дуже дякую вам та вашому народу за підтримку.
And,
І,
of course, dear Ursula,
звісно, шановна Урсуло, Антоніо, всі наші друзі, колеги,
once again,
Ще раз хочу привітати Данію, нашого близького друга, і особисто Мета з початком головування Данії в Раді Європейського Союзу. Ми можемо бути впевнені, що це буде час потужних та принципових рішень. А це означає періоду передбачуваності. Адже передбачуваність стала сьогодні чимось не таким частим, досить рідкісним. Але Данія – це та країна, яка не залишає жодного місця для сумнівів. Це країна та народ, на який ми можемо покластись. Данія несе відчуття передбачуваності. Ви дотримуєтесь своїх обіцянок. І разом ми можемо досягати значимих результатів. Тому дякую вам за це. І я також хочу подякувати нашим друзям, які є президентами європейських інституцій, Антоніо, Урсула. І навіть в такі символічні дні, як початок головування, ми не фокусуємось на символічності, а робимо справжні рішення, приймаємо справжні рішення. І це важливо. Ми говорили про те, наскільки важливо закривати прогалини в фінансуванні захисту та оборони. Ми працюємо над отриманням реальних результатів спільних програм, а також працюємо над тим, щоб Європейський Союз міг дотримуватись своїх обіцянок. Україна готова розпочинати роботу в кластері доступу, готова до перемовин та готова щодо рішень, які будуть гарними для обох сторін. Дякую за вашу підтримку. Пані та панове, ми в Україні створили спеціальну державну нагороду для дітей. Я розповідав сьогодні Мета цю історію. Це нагорода для хлопчиків та дівчаток, які продемонстрували хоробрість під час російських атак або допомагали в інших небезпечних ситуаціях, виступали волонтерами або демонстрували громадське лідерство. Нагорода називається «Майбутнє України». І справді, наше майбутнє залежить від того, чи можемо ми виростити дітей, які будуть турбуватися і які не будуть ігнорувати інших, які будуть дійсно бажати допомагати. І цей візит розпочався, у мене була честь вручити цю нагороду хлопчику, який живе тут, в Данії. Він є громадянином Данії. Його звати Єнс. І йому лише 11 років, як моєму сину. Але його доброта, йому 11, але його доброта та турбота вже впливають і надихають багатьох дорослих. Єнс під час Пасхи зробив речі з синього та жовтого кольорів українського прапора і продав їх, а потім купив рюкзаки для того, щоб відправити їх українським дітям, які дійсно потребують допомоги. І це було дійсно зворушливо. Але якщо подумати про це, то це насправді було зворушуюче і політичне. Адже бажання допомогти іншим і не залишатися осторонь під час війни. Це дійсно потужне повідомлення, потужний меседж сам по собі. І це саме те повідомлення, яке знаходиться в серці Європейського Союзу, в серці нашої цілісності. Ми об'єднані, ми працюємо разом. І Європа потребує Європейського Союзу для спільної підтримки, спільного захисту і для того, щоб впроваджувати ті цінності, які показав Єнс, показуєте ви та мільйони європейців щодня. Співчуття, щирість та бажання допомагати комусь, хто цього потребує. Навіть якщо ця людина знаходиться далеко від вас, ми не повинні цього забувати. Всі європейські інституції, всі наші угоди, вся наша співпраця і спільна робота заради безпеки – це все будується якраз навколо цієї ідеї, що європейці турбуються про один одного і діють як люди в повному позитивному сенсі цього слова. Саме тому нам потрібен Європейський Союз. І саме тому ми повинні захищати Європу не тільки від зовнішніх ворогів, але й від тих всередині, хто намагається замістити солідарність розділом, а співчуття замінити на холодне нехтування всіх, крім себе. Шановні друзі, наступні 6 місяців Данія буде головувати в ЄС. Час завжди проходить швидко, але саме важливе – це те, щоб ми досягли того, чого ми справді хочемо. Перше, нам потрібно захистити ЄС від тих, хто хоче його розірвати та зламати. Часто з особистих та корупційних причин, але єС повинен залишатись потужним, адже саме він дає єС потужність в глобальній конкуренції. Я сподіваюся, що під час президентства Данії питання вступу України буде рухатись вперед і нарешті відкриється цей кластер. І, по-друге, ми всі розуміємо, що Росія – це не просто якийсь небезпечний сусід, а насправді Росія це робить свідомо. Це свідомий антиєвропейський проект. Всі в Європі можуть чітко це побачити, що Росія працює проти європейського шляху в житті. Саме тому ми не повинні дати Росії виграти у цій війні. Ні в цій війні, ні в будь-чому, що стосується нашого майбутнього. Нам потрібно впровадити жорсткі санкції проти Росії, гарний захист для України забезпечити і створити власну індустрію захисту Європи, щоб Росія не могла перевершити нас в жодній галузі. Все це є критично важливим для збереження безпеки Європи. І ми повинні продовжити тиснути на Путіна, на Росію, щоб вони припинили війну, зупинили війну, щоб вони з повагою ставились до сусідів та обрали мир. Якщо Росія отримує високу ціну за нафту, вона продовжує воювати. Саме тому нам потрібно чітко обмежувати ціни. Якщо Росія може купувати запасні частини, обладнання, зброю, то вона буде продовжувати вбивати. Саме тому нам потрібно повністю зупинити будь-які поставки в Росію всього, що є або може використовуватись для виготовлення зброї. Давно настав час сформувати ефективну міжнародну платформу для контролю засобів подвійного призначення, і це може бути одне з досягнень під час головування Данії. І ми можемо працювати над цим разом. Нам потрібно обрізати Путіну та його обрізати Путіну гроші. Якщо банки російські можуть працювати по Європі, в інших частинах світу, то все буде продовжуватись так, як є. А нам потрібно підштовхнути Росію до дипломатії. Так, це непросто, але ми повинні зробити все, що в наших силах, щоб зберегти співпрацю між Європою та Сполученими Штатами. Так, Європа повинна більше покладатися на себе, особливо коли мова йде про захист своїх людей. Але завжди краще бути союзниками, ніж намагатися шукати якісь розбіжності. Тому наступні 6 місяців повинні забезпечити прогрес в захисті партнерства, покращенні співпраці. І неважливо, хто що каже, Європа є і буде однією з найпотужнішим гравцем та лідером з питань прав людей. Європа повинна стати глобальним лідером в галузі технологій для захисту та оборони. Це є ключовою метою. І найбільш важливо, Європа повинна бути континентом миру. Давайте використаємо наступні 6 місяців задля того, щоб приймати правильні рішення саме для цього. Дякую вам. Слава Україні! Україні.
Ram Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, here on day 1226 of the World News. And it's time for us to get on into the rest of the stream for the night, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, do we get to enjoy getting to talk to each and every single one of y'all. There is always a whole bunch of fun things, interesting stuff to talk about, either in the live chats, the super chats, or anything in between. But we are going to be making sure to get on into talking with all of y'all here very soon. But before we do that, we do have one last poll, as we were able to hear that Russia's oil revenue is declining steadily and has reached to a 2-year low. Will this implode the Russian economy? And 47% are saying yes, Russia needed that money bad. 29% said no, Russia will find new purchasers. 12% said it seems like a minor problem, and some are unsure and undecided. But I would have to go with the 47%. I do think that the Russians need money badly at the moment. The war is the most expensive it's ever been, at least right now. And not only that, the Russians are also running out of money, like we're hearing. So they need a lot of money, and they have a lot less of it than they've had at any other point. So in my opinion, I think that they're certainly going to be desperate for that money, and it's going to have a significant impact on their abilities to fight the war in Ukraine and also conduct any other actions that they'd want to around the world. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And folks, it is time for us to get on into those questions. And boy, howdy, folks, what a time it's going to be. What a time it was. And we are going to be making sure to get through all of them as best we can. Sorry, everyone, if I'm trying to filibuster here a little bit. It's just that running these streams like this, they are actually really tiring. Like, having to literally talk nonstop the whole time. That's why I let the whole speech go, like the 10 minutes of it. It's actually somewhat tiring to do that. And it's like mentally exhausting, really, more so than anything, because you've got to sit there and you got to think way ahead of exactly what you're even trying to say at all, and there's really no breaks or any ability to kind of like freestyle or anything like that. It's got to be a pre-planned rigid structure with these style of streams. So I'm trying to take a little bit of a moment to have a mental break so that way I can get back on track and keep this thing rolling. And so with that, folks, it is time for us to get on into those super chats. And then we'll get to the live chats, of course, because I do want to make it clear to many that you do not have to pay to have a question answered here on this channel. You just have to put @EnforcerMatt on your live chat, and then they're put into a spreadsheet, and then they'll be answered. And usually, considering that these streams are ending really early these days, because, it's just me yapping and that's it. There's not really a lot of dialogue or discussion or rabbit holes being had. If y'all want to do a rabbit hole, please feel free. I'd love to do a rabbit hole. It would allow me to have a moment to come up with something to freestyle on for a minute. But beyond that, we are going to get on into the questions. So with that, we have a $20 super chat from Your Fubar. And Your Fubar said, just saw this from the Warzone website, that Russia is really going to give North Korea SU-27s for giving them troops and weapons for the Ukraine war. The wiki page for the Korean People's Army, the Korean People's Air Force, shows 26 in service. Yeah, so we actually were able to confirm that. They also got an A-50 mainstay as well. So that actually is correct. They do not have 26 in service, however. It's more so 26 are eventually going to be in service, because we've never been able to confirm delivery of those aircraft, at least from what we've been able to hear. So at least at the moment, that's what we've got. And it does appear that at the time they have an A-50 mainstay that they're probably being trained on, but the Su-27 still have not arrived directly into North Korea. It's most likely the case that those North Korean pilots are being trained in Russia, and then they will fly the aircraft into North Korea, or the Russians will fly them in. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $20 super chat from Max Knightman. And Max Knightman said, former DoD contractor here, now joining a major band on tour overseas in October. Where may I find a shirt on stage and help support non-biased news in the music community? Oh, hey, well, thank you so much for the kind words, Max Knightman. And hey, thank you also greatly for wanting this shirt to promote our show and our news. We do not have a merchandise store at the moment, but we've been trying to figure one out for a while, or generally how to make it work a little bit more efficiently. And Enforcer HQ 3.0 is most likely going to be making things work out a lot better. We are trying to figure out where that is. I think we have a pretty good answer where Enforcer HQ 3.0 is going to be at this point. And once we get there, I think we're going to have enough room to reopen the merch store. And also, we're finally going to get help with a couple of behind-the-scenes things with the business that has been way too much for us to deal with. And at the beginning of each year, it takes up months of time to be able to deal with behind the scenes. It's a nightmare. So we are going to be eventually getting into Enforcer HQ 3.0. Sadly, that will not be happening before October. But considering that you would like to wear one on stage, reach out to Enforcer Matt on Twitter, and we are going to see if we can find some way to actually make an Enforcer t-shirt or say a LSA t-shirt, so that way it can be promoted on stage, because that would be nice to know the Lee Spring Army is able to get some attention, or at least the Enforcer channel is able to get some promotion in front of a large audience, because it always does help out with that sort of stuff. It's just that we don't know how to do that right now to where we could sell the shirts for profit, or, well, we actually do know how to do that. We've done it before. It's just that it's extremely difficult at the moment to do that, especially with the limited space we have, and also a whole bunch of other accounting and business things that we have to do in the background by hand after we do merch runs. It's impossible to sell them for profit, at least at the moment, which is kind of the issue that we're running into with the merch store. But we can certainly make a one-off and then just give it to you, so that way you can go wear it on that tour. But I do thank you massively for the support. Please reach out to us on Twitter, and we'll try and figure out a way to make that work if we can. But a huge thanks to you so much once again, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, Max Nightman, and we wouldn't have been able to make this channel a reality to this day. And hopefully you'll have a fun time over there on that amazing tour. That sounds like it'd be fun, and also really cool to hear that you're a former DoD contractor. And so a big thanks to you once again. And we also have a $19 super chat from SDNSO Group Unit 46, who said, LSA, long live the LSA, Ukraine, Ukraine, Illinois, Illinois. And I gotta thank you for the support. I gotta thank you for being one of our viewers from the state of Illinois. Very interesting state, mind you. It's actually the land of Lincoln, as they call it. And there's this cool place there called Peoria, which I've never looked at before, and I just saw it on the map. So Peoria, what's up with Peoria here? Anything interesting about the place? No. The pictures here, for some reason, are odd. Are y'all noticing that? I've never heard of this place before, and I think I'm starting to understand why. I don't get it. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support and help with this channel to keep on running. If you were from Peoria, I'm sorry. I just don't know anything about Peoria. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support and being from the wonderful land of Illinois. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to say, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. So a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, it is...
Can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah, I can hear you a little bit. You sound like you're like on a tin can, but I can hear you.
I am basically on a tin can, but yes, it's me. It's Matt on a tin can. But you know, one place that is really nice is the back parts of Iran. Actually, like the back part of Iran is actually pretty good. Actually, like I like it.
What's the back part?
You know, but pretty much the whole thing except for Tehran.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was like, what's the back part? I was like, back. I was like, is that like east, north, south, west, where? I was like, what's back? Man, I just don't know. I don't know. But Matthew is live. We have a proof of life from Enforcer Matt. He is not using his high definition microphone tonight. He is just using the microphone. The microphone he's currently using right now was actually provided to us by an amazing fan. His name is Alexander Graham Bell. He invented the telephone and also that crappy mic that Matthew is using right now, because it almost sounds like one of the first telephones. That thing is rough.
Some say this is the first mic that Alexander Graham Bell created. I'm speaking from here, but whatever the case is, I'm coming through loud and clear. Also, by the way, this is the MacBook microphone, so this shows you how big of a difference a good mic makes. Is a huge difference.
Yeah, man, it sounds like you're on a freaking Zoom call right now, like one of those ones that you see on like a prank call. You know what I mean? Like when people like hop into a Zoom call and they just start pranking people in the call. It sounds like that kind of quality.
Honestly, it does. I can just like tell by the way I'm talking, like literally to my laptop keyboard, that it's not sounding good without even hearing it in my own ears.
Yeah, man. If you got to, you know what? I'm gonna play a replay for you, man. I'm gonna let you hear it. So let me do this really quick. See, on like a prank call, you know what I mean? Like when people like hop into a Zoom call and they just start pranking people in the call. It sounds like that kind of quality.
Honestly, it does. I can just like tell by the way I'm talking, like literally to my laptop.
Bro, it's rough.
That
Like,
sounds so bad. That
yeah,
sounds
it is.
horrific.
It
It
is
really
so
does sound like I'm
bad.
talking to a box.
Dude, it really sounds like you're about to say, Hello? Are you from the land down under? You know, it's like you're about to hit a transatlantic accent here in a second. I mean, geez, dude. Like, they got to make the microphones in like built into the computers. They got to make them better, man, because that is terrible quality.
That is terrible. It really sounds like I'm broadcasting from like a back room in Iran or something, like I'm in like a really remote place.
And speaking of which, folks, Matthew has actually been on a special operation for the Lee Spring Army, and since it's kind of coming to a close, I think I'm going to tell y'all where it was. It was inside of Bremen in Germany, which
Oh
is
my God.
I'm sorry, Matthew. I had to tell him. I can't lie to them endlessly here. I mean, I gotta tell him. He was in Bremen in Germany. So if y'all were wondering, he was right down here. He was in the city the whole time. He's coming back soon. He's coming back very soon. But he was out here in Bremen. And he was talking to our informants on the ground. I'm just kidding, by the way. He's not in Bremen, and he's also not talking to informants. He's doing something entirely different. But because of security reasons, we keep that all on the down low until we return, and then we say what we were doing and what we were up to. So with that in mind, he's not in Germany. Just for all of our German fans who are about to get excited, he's not in Germany, sadly. He's elsewhere. But still, Matthew, would you like to tell the folks just a minor amount of details, not exactly where you are or anything like that, but just some minor general statements about the operation that you've been on so far for the Lee Spring Army?
I can give a little bit of detail, but I can't give a whole bunch because I don't know if I'm going to give away something that somebody can figure out. Because there's a lot of people on the channel that have some decent OSINT skills and might be able to figure it out. But generally speaking, though, I'm in a place that's remote. I can tell you that. That's why the internet's having an issue. I'm trying to use mobile hotspot to connect. That's not working out too well either. As you can tell, it's just not holding up very good. But overall, though, honestly, I'm not even sure really what I can say. I think I'm going to give something away if I start going into it. I can tell y'all on the Saturday night stream. That's when I'll be back on stream is Saturday night. Now the day I'm coming back, that's a mystery. But I'll be back on the Saturday night stream. So I can tell y'all then. But sadly, I can't really tell anything right now because otherwise I'm going to blow it.
Man, wait a minute. You're saying to everyone that you're actually going to be on Saturday Night Live?
Yes, the non-political version, yes.
Oh, man, and you're watching from Birmingham. It's Saturday night. Like, man, dude, we're about to get copyrighted for that one. But beyond that, though, he's, let's see here. A lot of people are putting out ideas. Outhouse? Is Matt hunting? Jerusalem? Canada? New HQ? Moonbase? Searching for Das Buddha. What the hell? Let's see. We're going to skip past that.
Somebody said, let's see, David Gears said, did Matt visit Alligator Alcatraz? Yeah, that's where I visited. It got flooded out, so that's why I'm having to cut the trip short. Now I'm coming back because it's flooded now. So yeah, that probably why.
Gators are eating people down there. Let's see here. Super surprise, alive from Birmingham. Loose lips sink ships. A lot of people are saying that, funnily enough. Let's see here. Hopefully you had a German chocolate cake with coconut shaving, someone said. That actually sounds pretty good right now. Let's see. He's on Hoth. Yeah, maybe he's on Hoth. New York City subway? No, Matthew would be dead by now if he was on the New York City subway. He's not there. Like, I'm just kidding, by the way. The New York City subway is actually safer than cars, interestingly enough, at least per trips made and travel miles and all. But beyond that, we cannot say yet. We will say, though, when we're back on air on the 5th of July, which is going to be very soon. By the way, folks, once again, want to make a big note for everyone who is here right now. We are not running a stream tomorrow. Tomorrow is an observed channel holiday. The 4th of July is one of the few times we take off air every year on the channel. So we are going to be off air on the 4th of July. We will be back on air on the 5th of July, the day after the 4th of July. So there will not be a stream tomorrow. I just want to make that really clear for everyone so that way no one's really confused or wondering why in the world there isn't a stream and wondering if we're alive or not. We are alive. It's just that we don't run streams on the 4th. So with that,
Oh, also, I think I can actually like say a little bit about where I'm at. Actually, pull the map over to North America real quick. Just pull it over to North America and just like hover over it. So I'm right there.
hey, that's actually, dude, someone's actually going to use that to get exactly where they are. They're going to be like, he's in Saskatchewan, in Regina. Like, they're going to be saying something like that in a second.
What?
Dude, huh?
What? What'd you say?
I don't know. I just heard you go whack, and I was like, "What?" Like, dude, you're like saying like that Buffalo Wild Wing and whack.
I think I misheard something you said there. It sounded like you said something wild. I think it lagged or something when you just spoke.
I said Regina in Saskatchewan. I think I know where the confusion might be. because I said, he's in Saskatchewan, in Regina, and then you went, what? I was like, what? I was like, man, like...
That's because the lag. I don't think the lag let you pronounce the whole thing. It sounded a little bit odd.
man, now I'm understanding. Now I'm understanding. And let's see here. I see some people say, let's see here. A lot of people are joking. Let's see. Let's see. I'm right there too. It's already the 4th of July today. Oh, well, happy 4th to some of the people who are already in the 4th of July, apparently. But I hope that was able to address that well. Also, Jay Bagwell, I did get your note, because I did see that in the super chat, just to address what Jay Bagwell said. I saw recently hired, and I was like, oh man, I was like, that must have been a typo. I was like, they're not recently hired. The Bay of Pigs happened, like, 60 years ago or something like that at this point. I was like, that was a long time ago. But yeah, I was going to correct that when I was reading, but thank you for clarifying that, Jay, just to make sure that we were doubly clear to fix that on the super chat. But still, with that, I hope that addresses that well. I also hope that addresses the Matthew proof of life thing. But something that's interesting, Matthew, you're actually coming through on the call now that you don't have your high definition microphone set up.
Honestly, I think I think it might just depend on the night. Like, I don't know how it works with the cell towers and the hotspot and all that, but I think it depends on the night. Like, sometimes it's clearer connection or something, because tonight it's actually connecting somewhat decent, but the last 2 nights it's been terrible. Like, it won't stay connected for more than like 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I don't know what's up with it, but hopefully we won't have to, well, luckily we won't have to deal with this for long. But once again, folks, it wins out again. Permanent fixed setups win out over mobile setups. They do. They just do. It simply does. And so with that, you remember that, folks. When you are running a YouTube channel, always remember, if you are going to try and go mobile, you might be able to make it happen, but the internet will probably never work anywhere you're at. So you have to get a Starlink or something, and then that might not really work in some places that you're heading, like the one that Matthew's in. It doesn't really work where he's at. So with that, I hope that does address that quite well indeed. And also, did I just see someone trying to insinuate that we are pre-recorded? Damn it, we're not! Like, I just gotta say that really quickly. I'm joking about being angry about it, but this show is not pre-recorded. It's just not. It's not. So, because, like, here's my question. If we were pre-recorded, how are we able to respond to the live chat in real time? Like, tell me that, dragon, with a little dragon emoji on your face. If I was pre-recorded right now, I wouldn't even be able to call out your name in the chat. Why the hell do people always come in here and say that this show is pre-recorded? It's not. We are actually busting our ass and doing this thing nonstop on air. Like, I thank you for the compliment in saying that I'm able to do this and Matthew's able to do this so seamlessly that it almost sounds like it's pre-recorded, because it sounds like it's rehearsed. But we're doing everything on the spot every night. This show is not pre-recorded. Like, that's like saying that the WWE isn't real. I mean, sure, it's staged and, like, they plan everything out, who's going to win and who's going to get their ass beat, but they are getting their ass beat. Like, there's no doubt about them getting their ass beat. But the rest of it's pretty much fake. But beyond that, now someone's going to come up, you don't know nothing about fake, brother. And I'm going to be like, okay, now I'm going to get my ass beat. But beyond that, it's not pre-recorded. It's just so old to see that. So many people come in here saying that, and it's like, no, it's not pre-recorded. I put a lot of time and effort into actually learning how to speak English well enough and think fast enough to be able to do this on air every night, endlessly like this. Come on, like, give some credit here. Give credit where it's due. Come on. But anyways.
You know what's weird? What's weird is, on my travels, I might have run across some people that were actual viewers of the channel, and they just simply didn't know it was me when they ran across me. Like, that's something that's kind of weird, because, well, listen, I don't want to go into too much detail again, but I might have run across some viewers. Like, there's just no telling. I wonder if I did. Like, until I speak, I doubt anybody could recognize me, because most people haven't seen the face reveal, but it would be interesting to know how many I've run across.
Yeah, I mean, like, you never know. You never know, because whenever I talk, man, people are like, oh, it's the Enforcer. And I'm like, oh, it's a fan. I'm like, hello. Like, dude, sometimes for just some of y'all to know, every once in a while, I'll be traveling around out there on Discord servers, hopping from one to the other, sometimes doing some things. And almost every time nowadays, there's someone in every server that's like, oh, that's the Enforcer. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, they actually know who I am. It's really cool, actually. But still, I hope that's a fun little aside there for all of us to get into. But also I see a lot of people laughing at the Hulk Hogan thing. Yeah, you know, I actually never told you that I did that voice before. I do very little of a Hulk Hogan, but I've done it from time to time. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can, you know, I suppose. And it is time for us to get on into the rest of our stream tonight. Also, to address one more thing the detractors say about this show, no, we are not AI. We're not pre-recorded, and we're not AI. I am not a computer. Matthew is not a computer. We are people. We do not show our faces because I don't care to. Like, I just don't like that. I don't think it agrees with the kind of thing we do. I just don't like it. We're not pre-recorded. We're not AI. We're not a machine. Yes, I whip out a whole bunch of facts out of the blue like I just know them. That's because I'm good at what I do. But that does not mean I'm an AI. Like, having some brains or intelligence does not make you a computer. It does not make you AI, okay? Like, I just want to make that clear. I'm not a machine. Now, I could give you all the typical answer that a machine would give, so let me begin. Hello, user. I am not an AI. I am not a computer. I am a real person. I am a human being. Please make sure to subscribe and like to this channel. Otherwise, you are going to be hit with the mesothelioma guy. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, you may be entitled to financial compensation. There you go. An AI couldn't do none of that. Like, so there you go. You got it. I'm not a machine. I'm a real human being. Anyways, we're going to be moving on now. We're going to be moving on instead of just rambling on. It's also hot as hell in this room. I don't know why. I think it's because I had too much coffee and I'm burning alive right now as a result of that. But anyways, it's time for us to move on into those live chat, super chat questions. We actually got more of them. We have a $25 super chat from Andrew Barbro. And Andrew Barbro said, Enforcer Return to Reality fun. Hey, I thank you for that. It's a perfect thing because we actually just returned back to reality instead of just sitting here doing whatever the hell we were doing for a couple of minutes. And we returned back to reality. I got to thank you for the support, Andrew Barbro, and snapping us right back into reality, the way we should be, all day, every day. So a huge thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep rolling, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling and make it possible. And so a massive thanks to you once again, and you snapped us right back to reality. And so with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $20 super chat from let's see. And it is a $20 super chat from Jay Bagwell. And Jay Bagwell said, great job on the solo stream. If you were looking for a rabbit hole, the CIA hired B-26 pilots from the Alabama Air Guard for the Bay of Pigs. Sadly, some didn't make it back. I screwed up on the super chat. Obviously, they weren't recently hired. Damn autocorrect. Oh, sorry, that was actually the correction. But beyond that, I do thank you for support, Jay Bagwell. And that autocorrect does wonders. I mean, it does amazing wonders, because you could type up something like, I had a good day, and then it just translates that or autocorrects it into you're ugly, or like that's happened to me plenty of times, and I'm like, why the hell does it do that? Like, I think sometimes autocorrect actually does that stuff to put people in hot water, because it's done that to me a couple of times, and it is just so infuriating. I hate it. So I completely understand where you're coming from with that, J Beckwell. But yes, they did hire B-26 pilots, and I believe B-26s were used in the Bay of Pigs invasion, if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty cool, actually, because the B-26 Marauder is an aircraft seldom ever mentioned outside of really avid historians of World War II. It wasn't really, it was actually a prolifically used and produced aircraft. It's just that it wasn't one that had a sublime service record. It was just more so an average kind of workhorse aircraft, so a lot of people don't bring it up or mention it much, but still, I think these things are pretty neat, and I've generally always been a bit of a fan of them. So I got to thank you for the support, Jay Bagwell, and helping this channel to keep on running. And as far as the Bay of Pigs invasion goes, it's actually a little interesting. As a matter of fact, the whole history of Cuba during that period is really interesting, because Bautista, who was the dictator of Cuba before let's see here, Fidel Castro took over, he actually was, he was actually an interesting guy. Not really a great guy, but he was certainly interesting, nevertheless. He grew Havana into a giant vacation and tourist hub for American tourists, but the rest of the country largely lived in abject poverty. And y'all are wondering, what did Cuba do? What did Cuba do before they became communist? Well, they generally produced cigars and sugar. That was about it. That's why Cuban cigars are famous. Cuban cigars are some of the best in the world, still claim to be to this day. And a lot of people are always trying to look for whatever is the closest to a Cuban cigar. And then also they produced a lot of sugar. That was really Cuba's main export, was sugar from their sugar plantations. And so most Cubans lived in abject poverty, but the sugar industry kept Cuba alive. And that was until the United States slapped about a 50% protective tariff on our sugar industry to stop foreign sugar importers like Cuba from killing off the domestic sugar industry. And that one move sent Cuba into an economic depression permanently. So the country financially collapsed in the 30s with the protectionist tariffs that Herbert Hoover moved forward to try and protect some American industries. That was right before FDR came in as president. So with that, Cuba went into absolute economic depression. Pretty much everyone in the country was unemployed overnight as a result of this. And so the Cubans were starting to have some issues with extremism, riots, hunger riots, all that sort of stuff. And so eventually, one guy ended up standing up out of the crowd, and that was Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro actually traveled around between the United States and Cuba before he pulled off his famous little operation. And in that famous operation, he pretty much did the same thing that was the Bay of Pigs invasion. He got a couple of his friends together with some guns and a lot of money, and he sailed on a boat out of Florida around Cuba, and then ended up landing, I believe it was somewhere around Trinidad. He ended up getting some support from the locals and started conducting a guerrilla war against Bautista, who was the dictator of Cuba at the time. And then he eventually was able to build up a large enough guerrilla force that they actually marched out of Trinidad into Santa Clara, and then ended up taking Santa Clara, and as a result of that, they split the island's forces in two. The Bautista forces in the north couldn't meet with the ones in the south. And so then he pushed on to Havana, and I believe Bautista ended up escaping Cuba and ended up living in the United States in exile, if I remember correctly. But that was how Fidel Castro was able to become the dictator of Cuba. Then after that, we went, hey, this whole thing is kind of a little busted. You know, we don't really like the communists being down there, and we really don't like the fact that the Soviet Union's trying to chum up with them. So the CIA, largely, by the way, it wasn't a JFK-led thing. It was actually generally led by Eisenhower and his vice president, Richard Nixon. But they started to come together with an idea of what if we just use the CIA through Allen Dulles to raise up this group of pretty much Cuban expats living in southern Florida and give them a whole bunch of guns and then send them on down to Cuba. So we had to make sure that the U.S. government's hands were clean technically the whole way through. So we contacted, well, the U.S. government contacted the mafia and got the mafia to hook up the Cuban expats with the guns and weaponry that they would use down in Cuba. And then we ended up providing them with some aircraft that were technically pretty much derelict. They were rotting in the desert. We refit them, gave them to the Cuban expats, and then we said, okay, go down there and have fun. So the way that we did that was that we gave them some boats. This sounds just like the Fidel Castro story. We gave them some boats, they had some planes, and then they sailed all the way around Cuba and all the way to the Bay of Pigs, which is actually really close to where Fidel Castro landed, near Trinidad. Very close. It was almost the same kind of a strategy that Fidel Castro pulled off initially to take over Cuba that the U.S. was helping the Bay of Pigs operators to conduct to try and overthrow Fidel. So they landed here, which is the Bay of Pigs. You can actually still see somewhere around here. Let me see. There was an airstrip here back in the day. I'm trying to see if it still is here. But there was an airstrip somewhere around here, and the general plan was that the guys were going to land on shore. They were going to take over the area of the airfield and hold it for a while, so that way the aircraft that they had could come in and drop off more equipment and supplies for them, and then also they were going to bring in the B-26s for air support. The plan completely failed, and the Cubans were actually tipped off, apparently, to what was going to happen, because they pretty much started to ambush the landing force as soon as they got on shore. They were pinned down the entire time, and then they eventually got overran, and pretty much all of them got killed. I think some of the B-26s, or some of the aircraft actually did get shot down as well, but it was a pretty badly executed plan, at least as far as the operational security side of it. It was poorly planned on that aspect, and so pretty much all the details of the plan got out before they even got there, and they all got bushwhacked and killed for the large part. But still, very interesting to share, Jay Bagwell, that some American Air National Guard pilot, well, Alabama Air National Guard pilots ended up being the ones who flew those B-26s in the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, Jay Garlick, George H.W. Bush had not even been a director of the CIA yet when the Bay of Pigs invasion began. Like, I think Alan Dulles was still the director of the CIA, so also no one backed out because it went ahead. Like, it went ahead and it happened. So, a little bit of a tougher sell on that one. But beyond that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. Big thanks to you once again, though, for the support, J Bagwell, and being an old guard of the channel. And not only that, a longtime channel friend. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $20 super chat from ZyperSniper1. And ZyperSniper said, pizza fun for the enforcers as the 4th of July here in Europe, and it's my birthday today. Hey, happy birthday to you, ZyperSniper. And also, a big happy 4th of July to all of the folks over in Europe that are already getting to celebrate the 4th of July. I get to thank you all greatly for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make this thing possible and keep it rolling. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and a big happy birthday to you as well, to an old guard and a channel legend. And with that, we're on to the next one, which is a 20 from Armin Heaven. And Armin said, happy 4th of July drinks, great show. And hey, a big thanks for the support, and thank you for enjoying this show. We try our best to run this show, and I'm glad to know that we were able to run it well. And a big thanks to you all the way over in the United Kingdom for the congratulations on the 4th of July. We declared independence from you folks about 250 years ago. Well, 249 years ago as of right now. But hey, I still think that the British are pretty neat. I think they're really cool, and also pretty much most of my family comes from there, so I think it's incredibly cool. I like the place. But beyond that, a big thanks to you once again for the support and helping the channel to keep running. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $15 super chat from Little by Little. And Little by Little said, with the West increasing military spending and honing their skills, tactics, and operational efficiencies in Ukraine, is preoccupying the USA really advantageous for China and their desire to take Taiwan? No, little by little. I would say no, because they'd have to get through the whole U.S. Navy and then maintain a multi-thousand-mile-long supply chain through the Pacific to do that. So I generally say that that would be near suicidal for the Chinese military to try and pull that off. So they'd just be better off trying to fight the war directly around Taiwan and then hope to stretch out the U.S. supply chains all the way across the Pacific instead. That probably would be the more advantageous position for them. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And getting the next one, we have a 10 from Steve's Gardening Adventures. At Steve's Gardening Adventures said, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, no question, just pizza fun. And thank you for the pizza fun. We enjoy pizza. We love pizza. Pizza is good. Pizza's tasty. I want a pizza right now, as a matter of fact. And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep rolling, because folks like you are gonna help me to be able to get a pizza and eat well. So a big, massive thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 10 from Sisyphus. And Sisyphus said, happy 4th. Always happy to see you guys. It's my birthday today. Fight the fash. And a big thanks to you so much for the support. And I get to say happy 4th to you as well. And a happy birthday to you. And we are always happy to see the folks in the Lee Spring Army. We really are. And so I got to thank you incredibly once again. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. We wouldn't be able to make it possible. And folks like you wouldn't be able to help me to keep wiretapping them. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And we're on to the next one, which is a $10 super chat from Jack Ragnarsson. And Jack said, why doesn't China look into taking Outer Manchuria instead of Taiwan? They would lose a lot less men and resources, and the West wouldn't be near as angry. Probably wouldn't even react, to be honest. Well, that's interesting that you'd say that. Let me go show you a map of the Qing Dynasty. Let me go show you that. Qing Dynasty. Here we are. So, here's China now. Look at this area up here, near to the head of China. This is actually called Manchuria. So, this is what he's talking about right here. That is outer Manchuria, or kind of the, yeah, actually, this is inner Manchuria, this is outer Manchuria, so that actually is correct. I was having to make sure to double correct myself if I was wrong there. But beyond that, this is the area that Russia actually controls, along with this area up here, that Russia controls in the modern day, that historically the Chinese controlled for a good long time. Now, the reason why the Chinese don't take that back is because the Chinese Communist Party actually does not recognize that as a part of China. They recognize inner Manchuria as a part of China, but not outer Manchuria. That's a little bit interesting about that. And let me show you that really quickly. PRC land claims map. So, Ah, yes. I see you know your China well. Let me go get this one as well. ROC claims map. And let me go show you this. Dang, let me go see. Dang, let's see here. I'm trying to see if I can find the communist one. Dip. I don't think I will be able to find it. Because they make them hard to find. Here we go. So, this is probably the best one I can find, at least at this point. This actually shows the land claims of both countries. And if you look here, what's interesting is that the People's Republic of China actually does not claim Outer Manchuria. They only claim Inner Manchuria. They also claim Arunachal Pradesh and also Ladakh inside of India, as well as most of the South China Sea, which you can see mapped out right here. On the other hand, this is what's actually interesting. The Republic of China actually claims more land, which, by the way, Taiwan is the Republic of China. They actually claim more land than the Communist Chinese. They claim Outer Manchuria, Mongolia, Tannu Tuva, Arunachal Pradesh, Ladakh, and also the entire South China Sea as well. So as far as the Republic of China's land claims, they actually are far more audacious with their land claims than the People's Republic of China is, interestingly enough. But that's why the Chinese will never take Outer Mongolia, is because they don't recognize that as a legitimate territorial claim inside of their government. The Taiwanese do. If they ever got the chance, they actually might try and take it. But the Communist Chinese would never. They're more so focused on the Indians at Arunachal Pradesh and also Ladakh. So I hope that does answer that well. Very good question, by the way, but that's actually the difference between the People's Republic of China and the Republic of China and their land claims. This is the best example that I could find. But with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. A big thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one, which is a $20 super chat from Adrian Hall. And Adrian Hall said, "You guys are great. More grant funding for the pizza scholarships and Slovakraney. And a big Slovakraney to you. And a massive thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so I got to thank you incredibly for supporting that pizza scholarship, because we're going to be eating pizza and learning about that pizza really well. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that addressed that incredibly well, and we're on to the next one, which is a $10 super chat from Shaggy Trip. And Shaggy Trip said, "Both China and Russia are economically failing. Is there thoughts to combine to save something? My thoughts are to tighten the rope, so to say. Stand strong and long live the Lee Spring Army." And long live the Lee Spring Army indeed. While both countries are economically failing, a union of the two countries is next to impossible. Putin wants to hold on to power, and Xi wants to hold on to power. If the two merged, the Chinese through Xi would be holding all the power. Putin would never accept that. So Putin would rather let the Russian economy collapse and die on its own than try and unite it with the Chinese and see if there was a way to survive. And the Chinese would also do the same thing as well, for the most part. So I don't think we'll ever see a national union of the two countries into one mega country for the large part. I don't think that will ever largely happen, at least from what I would know. And I could be mistaken, but once again, both of those leaders are power hungry, and merging the two countries, one of them would have to give up their power. So with that, a huge thanks to you once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And we also have another 10, actually, from Shaggy Trip. And Shaggy Trip said, "Ukraine has great resources along with strategic local. This would be a good power move at this point. What you say, LSA?" And I would say, unfortunately, I don't really know if I'm following that question too well, but as far as Ukraine having strategic resources, they do have a lot of raw minerals and materials inside of their country, which would be advantageous for the West to be able to have access to. That I can say. But I do thank you once again for support, Shaggy Trip, and helping this channel to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling and keep it running right now. So a huge thanks once again. And we are on to the next one, which is a $10 super chat from Clayton Wilkie. And Clayton Wilkie said, "Good day, enforcers. Why is U.S. not giving Ukraine weapons after signing the mineral rights in Ukraine to them? Clayton, Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. Long live the Least Spring Army. LSA rules, Australia, Australia, Ukraine, Ukraine. And a big thanks to you for the support. And I would have to say that at least from what we know currently, the United States is not providing weapons because we're claiming that there's some sort of strategic shortage of some vital weapon systems, which I'm doubting at the moment, but that's the official claim. With that in mind, I would say that what we need to do is we need to figure out why in the world there's a shortage and then just fix it. That's really the answer. Like, I don't know why in the world we try and make that sound like it's a million difficult things, or that we can't just build more missiles. We can build more missiles. So just build more missiles and then make sure to get them on out there. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Clayton Wilkie. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 10 from Tim Russet. And Tim Russet said, Telegraph is another cathartic source of Russia's funniest home videos. It really is, honestly. Telegraph is a source of plenty of entertainment, watching the Russian army fail on a million different things. So a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 7 from Broken. And Broken said, you guys are the best at source for the real unbiased news. Since finding you guys, I haven't missed a stream. Love from Saskatchewan in Canada. Hey, a big shout out to Saskatchewan. We actually were joking about that a second ago. But I got to thank you for the support and enjoying the channel. Thank you for not missing a single show since you found us, because we're always honored and greatly appreciative to know that a lot of people enjoy this show and continue to pride the channel for its high quality news coverage and the great level of detail and depth that it's able to get into. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that amazingly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 5 from B-Dog. And B-Dog said, what do you think the implications of Russia going to war with Azerbaijan, and would Turkey step in to help them and cause a regional war or maybe World War III? I would say that just the presence of the Turks will generally stop a conflict, because the Russians wouldn't want to take a direct armed action against Turkey, because Turkey has a decent amount of leverage over the Russians. They can close the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles to any Russian vessels, including merchant vessels, because they control that. And considering that it's currently difficult right now for the Russians to get their vessels into any other port, their ports at Novorossiysk and Rostov-on-Don are very vital to Russian economic activity right now. So they probably would not attack the Turks, even if it didn't invoke Article 5. The wrath of the Turks would be pretty tough to deal with just for the Russians. So I would generally say that with the Turks moving into Azerbaijan, the Russians can count themselves screwed royally at this point. And so a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And moving on from that, we have a 5 from John Hester. And John Hester said, have a nice holiday, everyone. And thank you so much for the support, John Hester. And I hope that everyone does have a nice 4th of July here coming up soon. It's only 45 minutes away, our time. So with that, a big thanks to you once again. And we actually have a 5 from United Kempo Martial Arts Academy. And United Kempo Martial Arts Academy said, do you think Ukraine's war ends when Putin's life ends? Who would be Putin's successor and who would be worse, or would they back down? Love the show. And a big thanks to you for the support and enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. I gotta say that, for one, I think that the war will most likely end if Putin did die. I think a new leader would come in and make it seem like the war wasn't that great. I would also generally try and paint Putin as a devil like he is, so that way they can try and differentiate themselves from him. That would be able to gain them a decent amount of loyalty, at least in the government, so I would have to agree, if Putin did die, the war would generally probably end. However, a new leader, we cannot even speak to the depths of who a new leader could be. Usually these leaders come from nowhere. Usually all of them did. Stalin came from nowhere. Khrushchev came from nowhere. Gorbachev was one of the few that kind of came from slightly somewhere. Yeltsin came from generally nowhere. Putin especially came from nowhere. He climbed through the ranks out of nothing into something. So it's really hard to say who would be the next leader of Russia, because usually it's a faceless, no-name nobody that we have to learn about really quickly once they take power, and then they hold power for as long as they can. So unfortunately, I can't really give a name, because if we were to give a name right now, it would be a big, popular name, and those guys generally just don't have a chance of making it. At least in every single other power struggle that's been had in the Soviet Union, everyone who actually had name recognition did not survive the power struggle, because they were massive targets. Everyone had a target on their head and were beating them down and kicking them while they're on the floor to make sure that they did not make it to the top. So I generally say I could not know at the moment. It's just too early to tell. We would have to wait until he dies and then just watch the power struggle and then look for some sort of a unrecognizable name or a couple of them and then go, these are our actual likely candidates, and then start learning about them at that point. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Big thanks to you for the support and an interesting question. And also, I just saw someone say Putin came from the KGB. That's true, but that doesn't mean you're somebody. Like right now, just to put this way, there is a no-name, like, and I don't mean this as any disrespect for all of those field officers there in the CIA, but there are a lot of no-name nobodies in the CIA. Some of y'all might even know someone who works at the CIA. It might not even know it, and you would never know their name. And that's what Putin was before the fall of the Soviet Union. He was a no-name nobody, pretty much working at the Russian CIA as a paper pusher in an office. So just because you work in an institution like that does not mean that you're a somebody. You know, like you could say, I was in the U.S. Army, but that does not mean that you were a 5-star general, commander of Indo-PACOM, CENTCOM, NORTHCOM, EUCOM, you know, all that sort of stuff. It could just mean you were a private, you know, maybe an E3 at the best, and you were there for 2 years and you left. You were like, no one's going to ever know who you were. You know, it's like as far as like the importance or scale of who people are in the Army, that registers as a nobody. Yes, there's hundreds of thousands of private first classes and privates in general, E1s, E2s, and E3s, or specialists even. I mean, there's a decent amount of specialists out there. That's why they're called the E4 Mafia. But beyond that, just because you're in an organization doesn't mean that you're always a somebody. Like, you know, here on YouTube, we have 472,000 subscribers as of right now. We're getting on up towards, as far as the channel, being a somebody. But to put it into perspective, there is another at least 160,000 YouTube channels out there right now that are bigger than us. So even still in YouTube terms, we're just a nobody. Like it's a big channel, yes, but we're still generally a nobody on the YouTube scale of channels. You know, and it's just better to recognize that. I mean, we're not like some sort of a massive influencer that actually influences things. We just talk, we just yap here on the channel. And you know, it's just kind of important to recognize this sort of thing, because if I went from doing this today and went from that to being the president in the next year, I would literally be a nobody rising up through the ranks, even at this point right now, because nobody even knew who I was really a year ago. I mean, a couple of 100,000 people did, but that's hardly anybody, at least on the national scale. So I hope that it kind of addresses that well, because just because Putin was in the KGB did not mean that he was an important, potent power player. He was literally a no-face nobody for most of his life. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $5 super chat from SD NSO Group Unit 46. And SD NSO Group Unit 46 said, LSA, Ukraine, Illinois, USA. And I agree. Long live the Lead Spring Army, Slava Ukraini, long live the United Kingdom, long live the state of Illinois, and long live the Republic indeed. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the last super chat of the night, which goes to none other than a channel legend, LSA Sergeant Figment. And LSA Sergeant Figment said, LSA, hit the like button. That is an order. And I've got to agree, that is an order from none other than LSA Sergeant Figment. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. So a massive thanks to you so much once again, because if it wasn't for folks like you, where would we be? Well, we certainly would not be here right now. So a big thanks once again. And with that, also, I just saw some people asking, where in the world do you get the number of how big your YouTube channel is? There are a lot of YouTube statistic amalgamation websites out there, and generally they all track the numbers of who's the biggest YouTube channels out there. Right now in the United States, we're the 35th largest YouTube channel in America, but worldwide, we're only the 168,000th largest YouTube channel out there in the world currently. So it's on up there, but it's not, you know, wildly on up there, you know, in the top 100,000 or the top 30,000 or so. That's when you're a major player on YouTube. But right now, we're getting on up there. We're kind of like middling. Like, we're not incredibly small, but we're not also massive. So, you know, a little bit of an interesting thing to note there. But anyways, With that, I hope that does address that well, and it is time for us to get on into the live chat questions. We have quite a many of them tonight, and once again, folks, you don't have to pay. You don't have to pay to get a question answered here. It does help us to keep this channel running and run it as a business, which helps us to stay on air every day, but you don't have to throw in a super chat. You can always just throw in a live chat, and eventually it will be answered. And we are going to be getting some of those questions right now, right here, right now. And so with that, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arabelle Garbo, and her royal fluffiness. And the enforcer Morse code reads, that Russian commander-in-chief became the commander in pieces. Didn't get the rest, sirens too loud. And long live the Lee Spring Army. And that's the sound of money, and y'all actually got that down on the nail. That was the whole Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all for getting that correct time and time again, because somehow y'all even got it right with the sirens being too loud. The bass is too loud. But beyond that, I gotta thank you incredibly to all of y'all for in the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps for once again getting that correct, because y'all have gotten that correct time and time again, and have continued to show that no matter what, y'all always get the Morse code message. Really impressive stuff. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on into our first live chat of the night. And our first live chat of the night goes to Cyprian. And Cyprian said, I see China invading Taiwan soon. Thoughts? I see China invading Taiwan within the next several years. Not immediately right now, not within this year, or maybe even the next year. I think it's going to be something that happens in 2027, maybe at the earliest. But from 2027 on to about the 2040s, I would say that the United States needs to be on high alert and remain vigilant for an eventual invasion by the Chinese of Taiwan, I would have to say. So I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is from Canada is Sovereign. And Canada is Sovereign said, then why in the hell is the U.S. decreasing their military support to Ukraine? This is an honest, sincere question. That, unfortunately, I'd have to give you the honest, sincere answer if I just don't really know. It doesn't really make too much sense. I can't even really answer it. Like, there's no good way to answer it without sounding like we're getting political. So unfortunately, I'll have to declare ignorance on that. But the truth of the matter is as long as I'm staying non-political, I can't even really give you a good answer. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So with that, I hope that addresses that decently, but a big thank you, Canada Sovereign, for asking a good question. It's just that we really can't answer it too well. Moving on from that, though, we also have a question from BC Mapper, and BC Mapper said, if Russia breaks up into several states, each with nuclear weapons, does this count as nuclear proliferation? Technically, it does, actually. That's what we viewed it as in the collapsed Soviet Union when the Soviet republics inherited nuclear weapons, like Ukraine. The Ukraine was not designated the successor state to the Soviet Union. Russia was. So they were technically in violation of the non-proliferation treaties. So if the Russian Federation balkanized, one of those balkanized states to come out of Russia would be declared the successor state to the Russian Federation for international legal reasons. And they would be the only country out of the balkanized ones that broke up from the Russian Federation that will be able to keep nuclear weapons. The rest of them would be in violation of international law and conducting an act of nuclear proliferation. So the answer to that is yes. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is from A.F. Kaplan. And A.F. Kaplan said, if the U.S. will not sell the Patriots to Germany to give to Ukraine, would Germany instead give more of their own IRIS-T systems instead? I think that is possible. I think that they may give more IRIS-T systems possibly here within the near future. From what we would know, the IRIS-T, though, it does not have as long a range as the Patriot. The IRIS-T is shorter range, about 20 miles out in range. The Patriots can reach out easily to about 100 to 110 miles, depending on the system. So they could, it's just that they don't really provide the kind of defense that the Patriots do. So with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least with the information we have available at the moment. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a question from Whisk. And Whisk said, what are your opinions on China's Fujian carrier? They claim they have emails down well. I have my doubts. What are your thoughts? I generally say that all of China's carriers are not really that great. Let me go type in the type 003. Here we go. Ugh. I don't like it. So it's like a modified Kuznetsov, pretty much. It really is. Like, there's no better way to explain the thing. It looks like a ripoff Nimitz, but it still has a lot of the defining features of a Kuznetsov. That's really the best way I can explain it. The amount of aircraft that it's going to be able to carry is 50, so it's still falling quite short of the U.S.'s ability to carry about 70, I think it's 79 aircraft on a single Nimitz-class carrier, or that many on a Gerald R. Ford class. It's still smaller by a good bit. In just about every way. I would generally say that it's not that impressive, at least in terms of its ability to project air power. So, I'm not a fan of it. I don't think it has a lot of promise or potential. I think it gets a lot of propaganda hype, honestly. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. It's just not really a lot to comment on this thing. I just don't like any of them. And also, take a look at this. This is the Shandong class. And this thing is a real dong. It's literally just a modified Kuznetsov. And then their original Type 001 was literally a Kuznetsov. Let me go try and find that one. Here we go. This is literally a Kuznetsov. Like, this is the incomplete Kuznetsov that Ukraine sold China that was still sitting around, I think, in, it was either Mykolaiv or Sevastopol being constructed, and because of the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was never enough funds to complete it. So China eventually bought it, and then they finished the construction and fitting out of the carrier. And this is literally just a modified Kuznetsov. It's terrible. Like, everything about the thing sucks because it's a Kuznetsov. The class is riddled with flaws. So it's a little bit ridiculous that the Chinese are evolving their whole carrier fleet out of a clearly unproven bad design theory and type. And from what I understand, let me also go check this as well. What type of propulsion system is this thing going to have? Steam turbines, but are they nuclear powered? Let's see, size. Oh, hell no, this thing's going to suck. It's powered by diesel generators. It's not even nuclear powered. Like, a U.S. carrier has a massive advantage because we do not have to concern ourselves with range or fuel. Our aircraft carriers literally can operate anywhere in the world as long as we're able to keep supplying the sailors on board with food and weaponry, because the fuel is taken care of. It's a nuclear reactor. They run for about 15 years without refueling. So, well, actually several years without refueling. 15 years is a bit of a stretch. But beyond that, this thing is just, it can't go far. Like, it's limited because the Chinese have to have a fueling tender around it to refuel it, or they have to have a fueling base, meaning that this thing can't operate globally because you can just slam the fuelers or the oilers and pretty much just knock it out of service that way, and then it's just a floating barge at sea adrift with aircraft on board. So yeah, this thing sucks. There is no way in hell that the Fusion is ever going to be a threat because look at this. Diesel generators. This is just, it's nuts. Like, you don't hear about that anymore. Everyone in the world that I know of largely uses some form of nuclear power. Like, let me go check this. The Prince of Wales class, let's see. Or is it the Queen Elizabeth class aircraft? Let me check. Queen Elizabeth class. We're just gonna type one in. Class aircraft carrier. Aircraft. Let's check. Might be diesel powered as well. Let me triple and double check that. Propulsion. Yeah, this is also diesel powered. Does everyone have a diesel powered carrier except for the United States? Let me go check the Charles de Gaulle. Okay, this actually might be nuclear powered. Yeah, it is a nuclear powered. So this is the only nuclear-powered aircraft carrier that I can see of in service in the world that is not American, is the Charles de Gaulle. So the French are the only other navy in the world that can actually operate their carrier anywhere, and the only concern is continuing to keep the carrier supplied with munitions for the aircraft, munitions for its air defense, and food for the crew. That's the only supply-side concern for the Nimitz, the Gerald R. Fords, and the Charles de Gaulles. So it's really interesting to see that really most of our adversaries, the Chinese and the Russians especially, either have no carrier. The Russians really don't have one. They have one on paper, but it doesn't work. And then the Chinese have three, but they're all diesel powered. So there's a huge consideration that they don't have a long range and they can only operate close to China. So it pretty much defeats the purpose of power projection. So as far as the Fujian, because of the fact that its propulsion is diesel based for a country that claims to be outing and upping the United States in abilities every day, this is just horrendous. It's backwards and ancient for the large part. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a question from Lord Cog. And Lord Cog said, couldn't another Western country just reverse engineer the Patriot and steal it if the U.S. president is unwilling to do the right thing? Yeah, they could, but they're going to be running into a lot of consequences as a result of that. They might as well consider themselves no longer a customer of American weaponry overnight. And the U.S. could also leverage its I guess you could say soft power with the rest of their neighbors to make sure that no one ever has any dealings with that country again. So you run the risk of serious consequences as a result of doing something like that. So the answer to that is yes, but there will be serious consequences as a result, and the United States would make sure that that would happen. So with that, I hope that does address that well. Good question, though, Lord Cog. And moving on from that, we also have a question from Run and Gunny. And Run and Gunny said, how long do you think Russia can continue to afford this war, given their current losses? I think that they can afford it for about another 2 years at the max, but I think that they're definitely going to be running out of money by that point. There's just no way they can keep up this kind of intensity of a war for that long, with the kind of sanctions and the lack of income that they're seeing, and the economic collapses that have already happened, without the country completely imploding, at least in my opinion. So I'd say somewhere within the next 2 years at least. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is from Quantum Fighter. And Quantum Fighter said, imagine what the withdrawal does to the AFU and Ukraine's morale right now. Do you think this is a turning point in Putin's favor of the war? And I would generally say, that's an interesting question. I don't really know the morale of the Ukrainian army. I would say it's still pretty decent, because usually morale keeps really high when the country is being invaded. Even if it's been an incredibly long war, usually the morale's high because they have a reason to fight and keep going. So I would say it's probably a lot higher than the Russians, but how high it is, I couldn't really say for certain. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And we also have another super chat, a $10 super chat from Dalton McKee. And Dalton McKee said, why no channel membership option? And I got to thank you greatly for the support. Dalton, you've been an old guard and a channel legend for a long time. Generally, the short answer is that I find super chats to be, well, not super chats, but memberships to be a little bit tacky looking in the live chat. We've been considering memberships possibly, but still we haven't really made the shot on that yet. If we did memberships, though, I want to make sure that's not stratifying the live chat to where, like, do you have, like, the grand dude, who throws in, like, $500 a month versus Pee Wee Herman, or something like that, and then there's like this power dynamic in the chat. I don't want that, because I see that on so many other channels where like the giant supporters on the memberships will be like, know your place, pleb, and I'm like, I don't like that at all, because I don't like it when people try and like exert some sort of power or influence on other people when we're all just having like a casual chit chat on the news. I see that everywhere, and that's also one reason why I don't really like the super chats too much, is that it makes it really clear, like, who's wearing the purple robes and who's wearing red. Like, that's kind of how it works. So I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't really know if we would ever want to do that for that reason. But we'll see one day. But still, if we do it, I want to make sure that's implemented well. And it's not implemented in a way where, a whole bunch of people are sitting around, feeling like if you say anything to disagree with a massive membership, or a massive member, you're going to end up getting axed. That's what I'm pretty much trying to say. And so with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is from Uncle Sam. And Uncle Sam said, we provide in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia the THAAD system and technology without any safeguards to come back to bite the USA in the future. What's next? Give the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia F-35s? Well, yeah, we did give them a THAAD. I think they're the first partner country that's ever been given a THAAD. I don't know why. Like, I actually don't know why. But I think they actually are in line to get some F-35s already. So I think that age like milk, that question. But still, I couldn't even answer that. I feel like it is a bit of a national security concern to give something brand new like that to Saudi Arabia, considering that I don't think they were involved in the development of that weapon at all, and all of the technology is proprietary to the United States. But, the powers that be decided different. And I think that was decided back during just to make it a little bit clear, I think that was decided back during the Biden administration, and the Trump administration just decided to press on with it and not deny the sale, most likely for diplomatic reasons. So that seems to be the case. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And moving on from that, we also have a question from David Tablet. And David Tablet said, is the enforcer saying that Ukraine's only path to victory is a Russian economic collapse? I mean, pretty much. Like, that's really what it's boiled down to at this point. Neither side can win a victory on the battlefield. So really all you can do is just keep bombing Russia's war industries and major economic machines into the ground. And eventually they'll collapse. And that's how the war is going to end. Because there is no way in hell anymore that a battle can be won on the front lines by either side. It is a dead stalemate down there. Like, whenever there's a frontline movement, it's literally measured in feet, a lot like it would have been in World War I. So, at least in my opinion, I would have to say that really the only way the Ukrainians could win is through a war of attrition where the Russian economy just collapses and simply cannot survive any longer. So with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And we also have a question from Deegan. And Deegan said, did you hear that Denmark wants to strip Hungary of EU voting rights for constantly blocking votes regarding Ukraine's EU membership? I have, and generally I would have to say that I find that to be a little bit undemocratic. While I do not like the idea of Hungary blocking Ukraine's ascension into the EU, at the same time, it also is not grounds to throw them out because, you know, EU members can disagree for whatever reason they want. So, while I would say it's annoying, I don't really think the Danes have a good argument to just throw the Hungarians out because, you know, if we're a democratic sort of a society, then we just have to agree that sometimes someone might have a stupid idea, and, you know, if they have a stupid idea and then they're blocking up the system, that's just a part of democracy. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. But generally, I'm not a big fan of saying, oh, someone in a democracy where you have the right to choose the answer I don't like, let's get their ass. Like, that defeats the whole point of a democracy. And then it's only a democracy in name, and it's kind of a lot like Russia, where you have a gunman outside your voting booth, and if you vote the wrong way, he's going to drag you out and beat you in the voting booth, and then force you back in, and then make you write up the right ballot. You know, that's kind of the system that you would be getting to at that point. So I hope that addresses that well. And also I see someone saying it's undemocratic for one EU member to override the vote of all others. Yeah, but I mean, that's how the EU works. Like, that's how they set up their democratic practice. So if one member can vote no, and then that screws up the whole process, the EU should change that or find a way to change that where it's just majority rules. But if the EU says that that's how their democratic process is going to work, and they require a 100% unanimous decision to vote on something, whether it be yes or no, then that's the way it works. I mean, I get the argument there, but at the same time, we can't say that because someone votes wrong, we're going to get them now, because that's like saying, okay, we have an election here in the United States, you can vote Republican or Democrat, but if the Republicans win, they're going to imprison the Democrats, and if the Democrats win, they're going to imprison the Republicans. You're literally defeating the whole point of the democratic system, because you're pretty much saying, if the majority doesn't agree with you, you are going to suffer the consequences of having a choice. And then that's not a democracy anymore. That's just a dictatorship in disguise, for the large part, at least in my opinion. I get what you're saying, though, Octavian. Like, I get that. But at the same time, if the EU did not like that, and the citizens of the European Union, like yourself, did not like that, I feel like y'all should largely propose to the EU Parliament that they change the EU Charter to where it is a majority rules, like an overall majority, like over 66 or 70%, and then that's what's gone with, instead of saying that it's an absolute majority. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to, let's see. And I would agree with you, Octavian. That's what I'm saying. I think the EU needs to change the veto rule. I think they should just change it to a 2/3 majority, because that's an overwhelming majority at that point. And if the overwhelming majority agrees, then that's what it is. Like, that's just how it works. And then, you know, then the overwhelming majority can pretty much force through the EU economic system the implementation of what the majority has agreed on, because that's how democracy actually does work. But as far as just throwing them out because they voted wrong, I would say that would be generally undemocratic in my opinion. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the third to last question tonight, which is from G Baby. And G Baby said, "Is Mr. Zelensky up for Man of the Century in our opinion? He is my front runner right now if I was Vegas." I would say that he's doing very good as far as leaders in the beginning of the 21st century, but I want to wait for the 21st century to close before I make my call, because I think we're probably going to see a lot of interesting times coming up ahead. And who knows, there might be some U.S. president out there we don't even know of yet that might do really well. I'm not saying that's me, by the way. Or there might be some other leader out there in the world that does something absolutely profound in the 21st century. And I want to make sure that we get through the whole century before we say that there is a man of the century. Because Zelensky's great right now, but who's to say someone might not top him? We still have 75 years left in this century, and there could be something even crazier to come yet still. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night, which is from Phil. And Phil said, "How long can Ukraine defend the Russian aggression without U.S. support?" I would say they can probably defend it for about another year and a half or so, I think. But that's kind of the issue. The Russian economy could take longer to collapse than it could for Ukraine to start getting pushed back really badly. So that's why U.S. support does need to continue. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night was Titan. And Titan said, "Happy 4th. Do you think Australia is going to be pulled into the China-Taiwan conflict?" I don't really think so, necessarily. I think that Australia will be kept out of it because Australia doesn't really have the ability to project far enough to Taiwan to get involved, at least militarily, so they'll most likely stay out of it, but they'll still be in open support of Taiwan. So it'll put them in a diplomatic odds with China, but the Chinese will never really be able to reach Australia to threaten them, and the Australians will never be able to reach China to threaten them. So in general, it'll be a nothing burger, but the Australians will be in the support of the Taiwanese for sure. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And folks, we've done it. We have reached the end of the stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching. At the peak tonight, we had 14.4 thousand people here. And over the length of the stream, we've had 150,000 views. Right now at this moment, there's still 7,000 people here live. And to each and every one of y'all, I thank y'all for being here for the whole 2 hours and 43 minutes that the stream has been running. And I hope that y'all have enjoyed this greatly. If y'all did, please make sure to subscribe. We've gotten up to 472,080 subscribers, and any additional subscribers that would like to join the Lee Spring Army are always welcome. We would enjoy having y'all here in the LSA. And so with that, we will be seeing you all on the 5th of July at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of war news from the world. Once again, folks, I hope y'all all have a great 4th of July. Have a happy 4th of July. And with that, we will see you all on the 5th of July. So with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, and Slava Ukraini, and long live the Republic, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
Army shall